Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 201. Back to the stronghold. Keeping the power of the pills in mind, Roland didn't immediately order the first army to chase the fleeing enemy. Instead, he sent Lightning and Maggie to monitor the situation. Those who had been injured in the line of duty immediately received treatment. During the whole battle, only 5 soldiers had been injured. They had all been hit by spears, and from the 5 injured people, 4 belonged to the artillery. He was pleased to see that when the enemy's wave reached its striking distance of 150 meters, his artillery group didn't disperse in confusion. Instead, they only lowered their bodies and hid behind the cannons, so that they could resume the attack as soon as possible after the end of the spear shower. From the beginning, Nana had been standing behind the defense line waiting on standby, but the most remarkable part was when the enemy turned around and fled, she ignored the rumbling sound of ongoing gunfire, and ran together with the old Viscount towards the position of the artillery soldiers, making sure to rescue and give medical treatment to those victims of short spears. After seeing her actions, it was hard to believe that only 6 months ago, this little girl had become dizzy at the sight of blood. In the end, the 5 injured managed to survive. And under the cheers and the salutes of the watching soldiers, Nana left the battlefield. In fact, this battle was much easier than the last time when they had to deal with the Duke's coalition. Without the drugs, the addicted militia had entered an extremely vulnerable state. Some of them even ran 2 to 3 kilometers, only to throw themselves onto the ground, no longer able to move. Soon after, Roland's pursuing troops had caught them all and began to escort them back to the Longsong stronghold. During the chase, the First Army was also able to capture 2 knights. Although they did not swallow the pills, they had still lost every thought of putting up a resistance. When confronted with the continuous pursuit, they simply chose to surrender, asking for the opportunity to send a letter to their family and giving a plea for redemption. 4 days later, they reached Longsong stronghold. Thanks to the intelligence gathered from the surrendered knights, Nightingale easily disintegrated all the troops left in the stronghold's castle. After killing the captain on the spot, more than 100 militiamen fled in panic, blindly running into an ambush the First Army had set up at the gate. Later, Roland's men found the captive Petrov in the castle's dungeons. He looked haggard, probably caused by his worry and anxiety, but because of his identity as a noble of the Honeysuckle family, he hadn't suffered through inhumane treatment. After nearly 3 months, the prince saw the acting duke once again. "Being able to see you safe and sound is truly good news, Your Royal Highness." Petrov's uneasiness finally relaxed, then he went through his experiences of the last days. "I did not know that Timothy's envoy. They all died." Roland leaned relaxed against his chair and said indifferent, "Most of the 1,500 people they brought to Border Town have died, and the rest are currently locked in the stronghold's prison." When Petrov heard about the complete annihilation of the envoys, he somehow looked a bit surprised. "Your Royal Highness, with this, I am afraid that the new king, no, your brother, will see you as a thorn in the eye." "So, do you mean I should have deliberately lost the fight, and obediently went with them to King's City, begging for his mercy?" While asking, Roland looked him directly into the eyes. Not able to face his view, the latter involuntarily lowered his head. "No, Your Royal Highness. The moment he set foot in the Western Territory, he became my enemy," the prince declared in a calm voice. "It seems that in order to seize power, Timothy Wimbledon is becoming more and more desperate. He is urgently in need of land and titles to divide between the other nobles to ensure their support. In case all you wanted was to live a life in pleasure, why would you want to manage the stronghold for me? You should already be aware of the point. Only when I become the king of Grey Castle will your position as the lord of the Western Territory be set in stone." Roland paused for a moment and then said, "To prevent this from happening for a second time, I need to form an army to guard the stronghold." "Army?" Petrov asked, shocked. "Yes, without any knights, only built out of civilians, a permanent army." Roland slowly explained his plans. "You have to pick out 300 people who live inside the stronghold, who will be trained by my subordinates on how to fight. The requirement for the 300 people is, they have to be civilians, they must not be guilty of any crime, they aren't allowed to be followers of the church, and lastly, they have to be between the age of 16 and 30 and without any physical disability. During the training, they will be living in Border Town, and I will provide them with weapons. From now on, your knights and patrols will only be responsible for urban security. I have written down further details on the parchment. With this, he handed a piece of paper to Petrov. You can announce a recruitment order and follow through with the screening according to the previous terms. If he wanted to have the control of the city garrison in his own hand, it was evident that stationing his own army here was the most appropriate approach. But the scale of the First Army was too small. They weren't even large enough to defend Border Town, so not even mentioning splitting the force to guard Longsong's stronghold and Border Town. The only possibility and best compromise was to let the other side provide the manpower, while he would carry out the training. With Nightingale's ability to detect lies, he could guarantee the loyalty of the group, and together with new military training methods and ideological education, it should be possible to form a fighting force soon. As for their weapons, he would equip them with the rapidly outdated flintlocks, so even if they got captured by the enemy, it wouldn't be a problem for him. Moreover, the army could also take over the task of information gathering and transmission, so as long as someone tried to attack the stronghold, Roland would be the first to receive the message. I understand, Petrov nodded. I will review the people you select, so I can only encourage you to not try placing spies among them, because it would be a meaningless act. Roland warned, you have already sent spies, and by now, they all have gone to the mines. If there is ever something similar again. No, Your Highness, the other wiped off the sweat on his forehead. I promise that won't happen. Then there's the matter of the church, the prince said while once more leaning back in his chair. You probably do not know that the stronghold's church has been burned down by Timothy's men and that they even killed the high priest. There is only a ruin left now. They have burned the church? Petrov became startled by the news. I have to report it to Hermes as soon as possible. The church's law states that the king and the lords are obligated to protect the local church's facilities from any harm. If they cannot prevent it from happening, it has to be reported to the new holy city immediately. As the former ambassador who was proficient in the law, Petrov's reaction could be seen as normal, and furthermore, such a matter cannot be concealed anyway. I am afraid that the church's follower living in the stronghold have already sent a message to the holy city on the same day it happened. It is true that we should report the matter, but the letter's contents needs to be adjusted appropriately, Roland said with a smile. You only have to write in the message that the attackers belonged to Timothy Wimbledon and that after they looted and burned the church down, they left the stronghold, disappearing without a trace. In addition, you will put this thing into the letter. He took a pill out of his pocket and handed it to Petrov. Just state that you had picked it up near the church, they will understand. What is this? They are the secret medicine of the church. Furthermore, it is also the object Timothy desired. It allows ordinary people to get a burst of strength in short time, but when the effect of the drug subsides their organs will slowly stop to function, and they will die, Roland explained. Timothy wants to rely on the drug to strengthen his army, allowing him to secure his precious throne. So, when the churches seize the pill, they will naturally understand his intention. As to whether or not they will take measures, is an entirely different question. I will follow your order, Your Highness, Petrov said, putting the pill into his pocket. Chapter 202 The Road to Development. Roland took a sip of his tea, then said, in addition, I intend to set up a primary education system in Longsong Stronghold, which will be the examination project that decides whether you will continue serving as the administrator or not. Hearing the word examination, Petrov's ears immediately stood up. Primary education system? Yes, Roland nodded with a smile. Now, after the church had been destroyed, the high priest killed, and the church's forces weakened by more than half, it was a good time to start the fight over ideological positions. He didn't expect to transform all believers into potential workers who met with his standards. He only hoped to weaken the church's influence even further. In case the holy city wanted to meddle in Longsong Stronghold again, Roland had thought about many ways to keep them away. They shouldn't even think about building a new church here. The primary education should be attainable for all of Longsong Stronghold's residents under the age of 40, regardless of whether they are men or women. The training will include reading and writing, simple calculation, the spread of natural knowledge and also ideological education. Roland waved his hand, holding off the others' questions. Rest assured, the cost will be deducted from the tax paid to Border Town. From the beginning of the next month, you only have to pay 20% of the tax. The remaining 10% will be used as special education fee. With it can you recruit a few scholars from King's City, or hire local nobles, knights or squires, but these people won't need so much money. 10% of the tax are at least 1,000 gold royals, so you have to do much more than just hire people with it. After thinking for a moment, Petrov opened his mouth and said, "Your Highness, do you mean to say that I should use the money to motivate the civilians to attend the education courses?" This guy's mind is indeed very sharp, Roland laughed. That's right, with the exception of the children, most people have to earn their livelihood during the day, so their education courses have to be held in the evening, allowing them to carry out their work during the day. And after being busy the whole day, instead of resting, no one wants to come round only to hear other people's nagging them, not to mention using their brain to learn how to read and write. Because of this you have to lure them with some means to learn, such as providing them a dinner that has meat, or if they are able to speed up the learning process they can also get a monetary reward, etc. And of course, a bright and spacious classroom is also essential. He paused. In short, you must try every means to popularize attending the education courses to all the residents of the stronghold. As I said, this is also your examination. After 1 year, more than 50% of the stronghold's population needs to have reached literacy. But Your Royal Highness, Petrov hesitated. No matter if they are scholars or belong to the nobility, they fundamentally have no experience with teaching civilians how to read and write, even less teaching them natural knowledge and ideological education. He had to read the hard-to-pronounce noun of the parchment. In fact, even I do not quite understand the words myself. By employing these people, I am afraid you cannot achieve your desired result. Do not worry, I have already taken all that into account. Roland paused. I'll send a group of officials from Border Town City Hall to help you realize it. Furthermore, all the books you need for the education will be provided by Border Town. They have a wealth of experience in how to teach, so they can show the people you recruit how to teach, and then, your personnel will have to start to educate the residents. At that time you and they will have comprehended all the necessary details. The specific arrangements will be done when they arrive. This way, as long as Petrov wanted to keep in control of Longsong Stronghold, it was inevitable that he worked together with the prince's staff, and by placing his aides at critical positions within the Ministry of Education, news reaching or happening in Longsong Stronghold could also be passed on to Border Town in the first moments. Seeing that Petrov didn't show any objections, Roland began to explain his final command. Thirdly, I plan to build a road between Longsong Stronghold and Border Town to shorten the traveling time between the two locations for pedestrians and caravans. Your Royal Highness, don't we already have a way between those two? Petrov asked in surprise. A mud path created by people walking over it can be counted as a road? With a width less than 2 meters, filled with mud by the rain, and furthermore, with all its holes, it will never be suitable for high-speed carriages. Roland shook his head. I want to build a road that can accommodate at least 2 carriages side by side. A road that is flat and straight, and won't be covered with water during rain, exactly like the road in Border Town. You mean a macadam road? The acting duke looked a little surprised. The costs of such a road isn't low. It requires the mason to cut the stones and then they have to pick out the stones with the right sizes which can be used together. A gravel road to Border Town would at least cost 5,000 gold royals, and with all due respect, Your Highness, we will never get so much money without a tax increase. The stronghold only needs to provide the workforce. The prince stated bluntly, you will issue a recruitment notice throughout the whole Western Territory, not just Longsong Stronghold, including all of the other nobles' territories. The monthly salary will be 6 silver royals. With that sum, I believe there should be plenty of applicants. For labor, 6 silver royals are quite a high salary. Petrov nodded. May you tell me how many people you want to recruit? At least 2,000 people, Roland replied. The monthly cost for such an amount of handymen wasn't a small sum. Together with masons and gravel workers, in the eyes of others, it would definitely regard as a ridiculously high costs. Very few lords would be willing to put their money into building something which seemingly wouldn't provide in return. This thought process could also be seen in Petrov's expression. But now, with Border Town being able to sell steam engines, and to maintain the balance between income and expenditure, putting the remaining money into upgrading the infrastructure was undoubtedly the best choice to make. After all, Roland never intended to store all the gold royals in a vault, which was often the desire of many of the newly rich. The construction of a high-quality road connecting the stronghold and Border Town was of the highest importance, not only to facilitate the trade between both places, but was also a prerequisite for the rapid deployment of the armed forces. If the trip is an inconvenience, even if I receive the news of an attack on the stronghold at the earliest possible moment, I would only be able to reach the stronghold in 3 days. I am afraid that by that time, the enemy's banner will already be flying over the highest tower. I understand, Petrov said. Now that you have so much to do, I will soon return to Border Town. Do a good job, Mr. Ambassador, don't let me down. What do you plan to do with the people held in jail, Your Highness? Petrov asked, after a moment's pause. For the first time, Roland didn't know what to answer, and after a moment of silence he spoke. Contain them, they won't be able to live for long anyway. Climbing onto Little Town, the prince embarked on his homeward journey. You do not seem to be in a good mood, said Nightingale after appearing next to him. Is it because of the civilians? They were all forced by Timothy, Roland sighed. If they hadn't taken those pills, they would not act like his minions at all and wouldn't have to die on an unfamiliar land. This is not your fault. The Nightingale reached out and held his arm. Of course not, Roland said without hesitation. If I hadn't stopped them, Border Town would have become the victim of Timothy's desire for power. And of course, the church that made those pills is also one of the culprits. That's the reason why you will wreck the church, to end the dispute, so that people no longer have to kill each other for such senseless reasons, right? Nightingale asked with a smile. No matter if they are ordinary people or witches, under your rule, they will all live a happy life. Roland looked into Nightingale's shiny eyes and gently nodded. Ah, that's a promise. Chapter 203 Home. The sea was like a blue earth, only more flat. If Maggie had been here, she would be constantly chirping and she could also ask her about how far it still was to the island. Nowadays, the only sound she heard were the sea's waves crashing against the sides of the ship. Although hearing that for a long time became tedious, for the crew, it was actually a lucky beat. It meant that today was a day good for sailing. Oh, now there is another one, Ashes thought. Under the pressure of a foot, the old teak board issued a slight squeak sound, telling her that someone was coming. I did not expect that you actually lived in a place like the Sleeping Island. A white-haired old man stepped to her side, his hands resting on the railing. That place, although it looks great, once the tide comes, most of the land will be flooded by the sea. It's not suitable for a settlement. Why not live in Crescent Moon Bay? It is the second largest island of the fjords. There are still many uninhabited spaces there. One-Eye Jack, the captain of the Charming Beauty, as his name suggested, he had a blindfold on his face which completely concealed his left eye. He was also one of the few captains that were willing to transport goods for the witches, even though the people in the fjords didn't hate witches, unlike the inhabitants on the mainland, but they also didn't love dealing with outsiders. Not everyone is willing to deal with witches like you are, Ashes smiled. The sea will indeed flood Sleeping Island, but it is precisely because of this, that as the third largest island of the fjords, is still a deserted island. The third largest island doesn't mean that it also offers the third largest amount of living area. Captain Jack just shrugged his shoulders. If you cannot live on it, its size doesn't matter. For example, the Searing Flame Island. What the witches are best at is altering nature, she said earnestly. Moreover, now where the island has become our home, as long as we don't have to face the suppression of the church, we can create an entirely different world there, a new world. She paused for a moment. How long has it been since the last time you were on Sleeping Island? The captain took off his hat and scratched the back of his head. It's been almost a month now. Last time I had to deliver a batch of witches and a warehouse full of pro rice. To tell you the truth, when they saw the group of young women frolicking on the ship, the expression on the faces of my sailors was only too foolish. You know how difficult it is for a stripling to sail over the sea, they are similar to a volcano that can erupt at any time, but fortunately I stopped them from drinking. Otherwise, my beloved ship may have met with a disaster. Ashes automatically ignored the latter half of his words. A month is enough time to make radical changes, Captain. I bet that when you see Sleeping Island again, it will be quite differently than from the island you remember. Is that so? Jack whistled. Then I will look forward to it. Wait a minute, what's that? He leaned over the side of the ship, trying to look ahead. Monkey. There is something in front of the mast. The sailor, known as Monkey, used his hands and feet to nimbly climb to the crow's nest at the top of the mast, and then lifted the observation mirror. Captain, that should be an island. Island? What nonsense are you speaking? Captain took out his compass and glanced at it. We still aren't near Sleeping Island, but except for it, what other island could it be? But it really is an island, Captain, I swear. To me your vow is as useful as a fart. Let me take a look, Jack said, taking off his hat. No, no, Captain, do not you come up here, the wind is very strong. After observing for a while, Monkey continued, by the three gods. He shouted, incredulously, I know what it is, it really is Sleeping Island. It's become taller. The charming beauty slowly approached the pier of the Sleeping Island, and the boatman could scarcely believe his eyes. The towering island was similar to a small mountain which stood out above the sea level. The mountain wall was perfectly straight and precipitous, distancing the top of it by at least several feet from the sea level. Ashes, who arrived at the island for the first time, showed a much calmer reaction than most of the other people, which was in the eyes of Captain Jack were the very symbol of calm and self-confidence. You win, he sighed. I never expected that you would be able to make an island rise. It is not surprising that the bunch of madmen in the church hate your witches after all, your abilities make you almost comparable to the gods. Uncle Jack, it's not like you said, that the island has risen up, a young girl that stood at the pier to welcome them laughingly said, we just built a wall around Sleeping Island, if you wait for a moment, you can come with us and take a look to understand it. Finished speaking, she turned to Ashes and bowed her head in salute, you have finally come back, Lady Tilly has been talking about you for a long time. Ashes touched her head, you don't need to be so polite, Molly. I will have to trouble you with carrying my stuff. Leave it to me, said the girl, patting her chest. After the sailors had moved the grain from the cargo hold to the pier, Molly summoned her magic servant, a light blue sphere with 2 arms that could be transformed at will. It took hold of a dozen bags of grain with its arm. Soon after, the arm turned into a net, and was firmly grabbed by the other arm while the sphere floated in the air. Then she proudly said, let's go. Oh, that's truly a convenient ability, the captain slapped his fist in his palm. Men, have you seen it? A work for which so many of you are needed, was done by a little girl. The constructed pier of the island reached to the half the wall's height. If they ever wanted to step on the top and enter the island, the entire group of people would have to climb the flight of steps which circled along the wall. Ashes instantly understood the idea behind building a wall circling the island. Instead of raising the island, they had rather raised the outline of the island, turning the entire Sleeping Island into a basin surrounded by a thick edge. And this edge, which circled the island, was the so-called wall Molly had spoken of. At the inner side of the wall, there were many stairs leading down it, and nestled below them laid Sleeping Island. This is incredible, Captain Jack smacked his lips. You have turned this island into a city, just imagine how it would look like at high tide, my God, you would be living below sea level. It's indeed as you have said, Molly was unable to mask her grin. Because of this, we also have 2 docks, one at the bottom of the ocean, and one at sea level. Of course, you can also say that one is at sea level and the other is in midair. Coming to the center of the island, they came across of all kinds of houses. Unlike those traditional wood or brick houses, these buildings seemed like the wall as if they had just grown out of the ground, fusing the body of the house together with the ground. There is no doubt that, together with the wall, they count as a lotus masterpieces. Sister Ashes, the house at the most northern end is Lady Tilly's palace. I will take the captain with me to complete the delivery. You don't need to come along for this, it would be for the best if you first went to go see the lady. the little girl waved in the direction of the path. Ashes nodded, and said goodbye to the two, quickly following the path to the north. Along the way she saw a lot of familiar faces, they all either bowed in greeting or waved at her with a smile. The homeland of the witches, the word grew brighter and brighter within Ash's heart, filling her whole body with strength. The founder of the homeland was Tilly Wimbledon, the Queen of Witches. And contrary to the royal palace, her spacious house had no guards in it, and there were also no locks on the doors. Allowing Ashes to walk through the vestibule, and directly step into the hall, only to see a familiar back in front of her. She quietly walked on tiptoe to behind her counterpart and blindfolding the gray-haired woman's eyes with her hands. "I perceived you as soon as you reached the door," the other laughed. "Do not forget how I picked you out of the crowd to begin with." The extraordinary had the ability to sense the magic in others, and between two extraordinaries this feeling was even stronger. This was because their magic was connected with one another, like an invisible fetter, firmly connecting Tilly and her together. "I'm back," Ashes said softly. "And," Tilly replied cheerfully, "welcome home." Chapter 204 Tilly Wimbledon. For a moment, the two of them enjoyed the warm atmosphere, until Ash's attention was drawn to a bunch of jewel-like gadgets in front of her. Curiously she asked, "What are these?" "Come," Tilly patted the place next to her body, "I'll show you something interesting." Ashes followed her suggestion and sat cross-legged next to Tilly, seeing how she put a white silk glove over her hand, which had a crystal ruby embedded on the back of the hand. "This is a tracking stone?" Tilly didn't give her an answer. Instead, she just smiled and reached into the open air. Suddenly, a flash of lightning jumped from her fingertips, hitting the ground, issuing a crackling sound, followed by smoke rising from the ground, finally leaving behind a palm-sized black mark. Ashes couldn't believe her eyes. "You have a new ability." Tilly Wimbledon was an extraordinary. Her magic was only usable on herself, manifesting in her unsurpassed intelligence, making it impossible for her to have her magic manifest like typical witches' abilities would. The lightning flash just now meant that she now possessed a whole new ability, something which should have been impossible. A witch could never have two kinds of primary abilities. This was common sense that all witches were aware of. Tilly took the glove off and handed it to Ashes. "It is not that I have a new ability, rather it is because of this stone." She smiled. "It has the power to change how your magic works, and make your magic to even show an effect totally opposite to your current one." When Ashes rubbed the jewel on top of the glove, she became shocked to her core. She immediately knew that Tilly hadn't lied to her, which meant that from now on, non-combat witches would also have the ability to fight, significantly enhancing the witch's ability to resist the against enemy. "How many of these stones do we have?" "There's only one." It seemed that Tilly already understood Ash's thought process. In addition, it's also not that easy to use. You have to accept magic as something that actually exists, then you have to fill the stone with this magic and only then you can release it. For a long time Ashes painstakingly meditative wished for it, but no trace of light could be seen. "Do you believe me now?" Tilly said teasingly, "We extraordinary have it better than others, we can sense magic. For other witches it is much more challenging, it's taking our imagination and comprehension to its limits. As a matter of fact, I have already tested a lot of witches, but only 2 to 3 out of 100 were able to comprehend it and release the lightning early enough." "Are you mocking me for being slow-witted?" Ashes took off the glove and threw it to the side. "Pretty much." Tilly raised her eyebrow. "At that time, I merely used." To stop her, Ashes kissed her, only permitting her to croon for a bit. When they finally separated, the latter took in a long breath. "Well, not so stupid after all." "And what is with those other stones?" As if wishing to continue, Ashes licked her lips. Only in the presence of the fifth princess was she able to fully relax. Could it be that they all possess a different kind of capabilities? "Yes, they show a different result," Tilly confirmed. A blush had still not gone from her cheeks. "However, they still won't allow the ordinary person to possess witch-like abilities, only people with magic power can arouse it." She paused, which left me with a question. "What is your question?" "What exactly is magic?" Tilly said slowly, one word at a time. "For a long time now, the witch's abilities were manifold and varied widely, showing a high degree of uncertainty to it, and in the perception of an extraordinary, witches were also different. But with this strange stones, magic becomes completely be the same, through it, any witch can release the same ability. Therefore, I might have been following the wrong lead previously. Magic itself is perhaps one type of omnipotent power, but us witches can merely manifest one of its forms. Then these magic stones? Ashes asked. They can only release, but they cannot gather magic. It is not clear whether they are human-made, or formed from nature, Tilly said regretfully. According to legend, they were unearthed from within the relics. At present, the greater part of them have already spread within the folk. I only managed to collect this much. I heard that an ancient ruin lies in the eastern part of the Seawind region. I really want to go and take a look for myself. Maybe I could find more information about magic and some intelligence on the forgotten history there. Several of the words Tilly had used left Ashes unable to make sense of what she was hearing, and furthermore, Ashes also reluctantly had the thought, in the end, as long as we are able to live, who cares about what had happened 400 years ago? It is better you don't. Right now, the Seawind region is the most dangerous region in all of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Why? Before I set off from Port of Clearwater, I've heard the sailors chatting about that Garcia Wimbledon's Black Sail fleet being dispatched, with the Seawind region, which belongs to Timothy, as its destination. Directly hitting his camps from behind the front lines. Ashes explained, when the martial law had finally been lifted, I took the next opportunity to leave the harbor. If my information is correct, I am afraid that the Seawind region has already been turned into a sea of flames. They are still fighting each other. Tilly looked a little worried. This way, the church will take advantage of it and start an invasion. If we cannot unite, Grey Castle will fall. The same as had happened to the Kingdom of Endless Winter, we will be swallowed by the church. This sentence started Ashes, and was instantly noticed by the fifth princess. What is it? Nothing, she sent her a wink. You look somewhat similar to Roland Wimbledon. Furthermore, he even said the same thing to me. Oh? Did you see him? Tilly's interest was piqued. By the way, you didn't tell me anything about the trip to the west. I had heard news that the Witch Cooperation Association was in Border Town, but Shadow should have already told you of this. Ashes embraced her counterpart. The results that I had discovered was that the so-called Holy Mountain they had supposedly found was a hoax created by Roland. He took over the Witch Cooperation Association and was secretly recruiting the witches. Afterward, she told Tilly what she had heard and seen during the week she had stayed in Border Town, and at the end, he also said to me that we have to unite if we want to resist the church. If they ever attacked us here in the fjords and we could no longer stay, we are always welcomed in Border Town. Well, Tilly thought for a moment, and then suddenly said, this man is not Roland Wimbledon. He has been replaced by someone. What? You said he had gathered a great number of witches around him, right? What I guess is, that among them was a witch who took control of him, or simply changed her appearance to match his. Tilly said bluntly, I've grown up with Roland. It is clear that compared with my two other brothers and my third sister, the thing he was always the worst at was to cover up the truth. Even if he were to tell a lie, the lies would still be full of 100 loopholes. It is impossible for him to disguise as another person. As for the weapons you said they could use to fight against the God's punishment army, they are only proving it. An individual may hide his true character, but he cannot fake scholarly knowledge. The court mentors never taught him those things, so how can he know it? Tilly stated, the people that are born into the world aren't born with knowledge, so he is certainly not my stupid and annoying brother. It's like that? Ashes frowned. Nevertheless, it is still necessary for me to get in contact with them, Tilly sighed. After all, Roland Wimbledon is still my brother. Even though he might be ignorant and incompetent, that doesn't mean that he is hopeless. Compared with the others, he was the most harmless. So I hope that the witches of the Witch Cooperation Association haven't already buried him in the earth. I do not think they'd do that. Ashley thought of Wendy. I also left Maggie with him. At the end of the month, she should come back and bring us news from Border Town. that the only way, after all, our current focus doesn't lay here, speaking until here, the fifth princess freed herself from the embrace and went to the garden, and said, with open arms, now that you are back, the cleaning program can finally be implemented. I want no traces of the church to be left in the fjords, only then will the fjords truly become the home of the witches. The sun shone from behind Tilly's body, making it appear as if she was covered by a layer of gold. Her long gray hair caressed her cheeks like golden threads, her face was full of confidence, as if there didn't exist any difficulty that could strike her down. I wish to devote my life to you, honored queen of mine. Ashes bowed, with a smile. Chapter 205 Microscopes. After Timothy's armed forces had been repulsed, Border Town became calm once again. Roland selected 3 people from the City Hall's Ministry of Education and added another 2 teachers to form a team, which he then sent, together with some of Soraya's books, to Longsong Stronghold. No matter how much effect they could achieve, he finally took the first step for the assimilation of the stronghold. Petrov, although he did not excel at commanding a battle, his performance in administration was outstanding. In just 1 week, 2,000 recruited road workers, escorted by cavalrymen, came to Border Town one after the other. If not for the second batch of 10 blast furnaces he'd already put into production, Roland would also never have dared to make the firm resolution to establish a hard road between the 2 locations. But now, he finally had the opportunity to extravagantly spend a lot of money. Roland named the road the Kingdom Main Street, and Karl, the head of the Ministry of Construction, was fully responsible for its construction. Its structure and the streets in the town were exactly the same, a cement-stabilized gravel layer. During this era, where there existed no heavy vehicles, this kind of pavement was already sufficient to undertake every transportation tasks. Moreover, with a good drainage performance, if the circumstances ever demanded, later on, and concrete or even an asphalt pavement could always be added. To always have enough construction material, for steam-driven milling machine replaced the labor power that was required to crush the stones, producing dozens of tons of gravel and material each day. It was the too small transportation capacity, which hindered the further rise of the output. So many stones needed hundreds of people to send the stones with carriages to the construction site during the day. For the later generation of roads, one single muck car would have been enough to complete the whole shipment. With the exception of the 4 furnaces which maintained the clay brick firing, the rest of the blast furnaces had been put into the production of cement powder. After going through repeated component tests, as well as making sure that the mine provided enough iron powder, Border Town's cement production, whether it be its quality or quantity, they were both far better than the original batches. However, the mass transport of gravel and cement powder also brought a large negative impact to the town, of which the most severe problem was the dust. Until the afternoon, there had only been little wind, so that a dense cloud of dust could be seen flying in the sky, turning the street into a light yellow. Although most of the town people did not mind such a situation, for Roland, there was nothing worse than having to shut all of the doors and windows during the hot summer. Therefore, the carriages for transporting the cement powder and gravel had been fitted with a cover plate as quickly as possible, to reduce the dispersion during the transportation. At the same time, he also used it as a chance to promote leasability. Within a few days, the inside of the town was covered with shade-providing trees. They were symmetrical parasol trees, which leaves had grown one branch after another, creating the impression that the scenery appeared to be full of green for as far as the eye could see. With Roland's additional appeal to all of the people, that they should take the initiative and sprinkle water over the dust, the situation had quickly been improved. The straight distance between the 2 places was less than 70 kilometers, but considering that the road had to avoid the extensions of the impassable mountain range, the total length of the road would be around 100 kilometers and its expected construction duration would be 1 year. With roads of such excellent quality, some modern kinds of vehicles could also come in handy, such as bicycles and steam-powered cars. In his vision for the future, the development of education and the upgrading of the road were necessary steps to fuse the 2 cities together. Just like the cities of the later generations would energetically carry out urban integration. After the land between these 2 places was fully opened up, Border Town and Longsong Stronghold would slowly merge into one huge city. And in case he could even integrate the southern hill into the city, he could then open up a path through the edge of the mountains, and even get an outgoing seaport for himself. Of course, being able to develop so much land would require an even larger population. And in response to the possibility of future wars, the city would need to be self-sufficient with its food production, while also providing a significant number of workers for the industrial production. From his preliminary calculations, he would need around 100,000 residents, while Greycastle's largest city, King's City, had only around 20 to 30,000 people. When thinking about this issue, Roland remembered that the north and south of the Kingdom of Greycastle are both places that have recently experienced a war. So, when the winter comes, it is likely that there will be a large number of refugees coming who would be deprived of food and clothing. By offering them food and a warm shelter, they can all be absorbed into Border Town. Furthermore, I also have to take into consideration that there should also be many refugees within the Kingdom of Endless Winter and the Wolfshark Kingdom. For that reason, it would be better to write Margaret a letter and ask her to help me to find out how the situation is within those two countries. After he had finished writing down the recent development program, the prince folded the paper and placed it into the drawer. Afterward, he stretched out his tensed-up body and decided to go to Anna's room to take a look at how much progress she had made with creating a lens. Ever since he learned about the reasons for Soraya's magical evolution, he was intent on making a microscope, which would allow the witches to observe the structure of cells. If they could examine the unusual microscopic world with their own eyes, it might lead even more witches to evolve a new ability, the worst case being, he will at least arouse their interest in learning about it. For the production of microscopes, creating the convex lens responsible for enlarging the object wasn't difficult. The difficulty part laid in the problem that the focal length was differently for every hand-polished lens, therefore matching the eyepiece to the objective was a delicate operation, needing to adjust the distance between the two lenses repeatedly. He had described the principle behind the convex lens only once, and then given Anna a few pieces of crystals that had a fine quality, letting her cut the lenses and measure their focal length. Now, after 3 days, Roland's heart was full of curiosity as to what extent Anna had been able to realize it. When he came to the door of Anna's room, Nightingale sent him a smile, standing against the wall. She seemed to be saying that she wasn't going to follow him in. Since she had reduced her stealth time, Roland no longer had to guess her whereabouts. And whenever he and Anna wanted to be alone, she would always choose to stand at a distant location. When he opened the door, he saw Anna sitting at the table, playing with a metal tube. "How is it?" he asked, stepping forward. The moment after the question left his lips, he became shocked. There on the table laid several instruments which resembled an actual microscope, coming very close to the sketches he had drawn for her. "With the few test products I made according to your blueprints, I can indeed see a lot of details which are usually very difficult to discover." She looked up, letting her slender bangs slide down from one side of her face. "I used it to look at paper, leaves and stagnant water, and found out that they look very different from their usual appearance." Since their experience during the hot air balloon trip, when they had both been alone, Anna no longer used any titles, which also made him feel very more relaxed. "How did you do it?" Roland exclaimed. "The sketch was only a rough outline." "The outline was enough," Anna laughed. "You see, as long as the eyepiece and the objective lens are fixed at the appropriate distance, they can play the role of the amplifier. Afterward, they only needed to be fixed to an iron pipe, and with this, the microscope's body is completed. As I was testing the magnification of the lens, I found out that the objective and observation target had to maintain a particular distance within which I could see a distinct image. Whenever my hand shook, the image would become blurred. From your diagram I could see that you needed a frame to which to attach the lens to, and a platform, which could be moved up and down to get to the best distance to the object." She paused. "But it is harder to figure out for what the bottom piece is. Can you tell what it is for?" Roland swept his eyes over the drawing and discovered that this issue was his own mistake. It was a mirror, which was used to increase the light falling onto the object, but during this era, they had yet to invent the mercury mirror. The typical aristocrat still used a bronze mirror or an iron mirror to arrange their appearance. While they had a glass frame that was covered with a thin silver layer within the imperial palace, to get a better reflection effect. Even without this mirror, as long as the sunlight was strong enough, the microscope could still be used. After explaining the mirror in detail, he couldn't help being amazed by Anna's comprehension. Even by solely relying on a rough drawing of an outline, she had created a product which came close to the finished goods, something which would be absolutely impossible for him to have done. Seeing that when Anna had bowed her head to examine a new lens, she was exposing her fair neck, Roland couldn't stop from stepping forward and wanting to kiss. But she merely placed her hand on his face and gently pushed him back. Later, Your Royal Highness, I'm busy now. Fine. Chapter 206 Insect Swarm. In the end, the problem of the mirror was solved by Soraya. According to her, she had went and fetched some mercury from the laboratory and spread it directly on top of the glass, afterward painting a shiny coated layer on top of it. In this way she achieved a similar effect to that of a mercury mirror, but also eliminating the risk associated with mercury vapor poisoning. Compared to a pasted silver mirror, the overall coated mirror offered much better reflection. Afterward, Roland simply set aside a number of crystal glassware, so that each witch could get a small hand mirror. The small gift, which allowed the witches to clearly see their appearance, made them all very happy. Even Scroll, who was usually always exposing a neutral expression, revealed a rare smile. Seeing all this let Roland sigh in regret. Although the witches weren't fertility, they were still women at nature. Unfortunately, this useful commodity could temporarily not be sold to the public at a low price. After all, its base was made out of the highly priced crystal glass. Furthermore, the laboratory had also consumed a lot of crystal glass to create this colorless, transparent container. Kyle Sichi, contrary to what one might expect, knew how to create crystal glass, but the laboratory had been burdened with other tasks so that there were seldom any empty hands. Most of the apprentices were busy with refining the two acids, soaking the cotton fire. While the chief alchemist took 2 or 3 disciplines and concentrated entirely on solving the barrier to the creation of mercury fulminate. Until the industrial acid method was thoroughly researched, they still didn't want to make anything else for the time being. Apart from the reflecting mirror, Roland also suggested that instead of manually moving the stage to control the distance to the object, it could also be done by turning a small knob on the side. He only needed to describe the two alternation with a few words, before Anna understood what he meant. Summoning her black flame, the new stabilizing framework was quickly constructed. Afterward, she picked the 2 set of lenses with the highest degree of magnification, in this way creating the very first optical microscope. Taking advantage of the sufficient afternoon sun, Roland called all of the members of the Witch Union into the castle's backyard, thereby starting the first ever fundamental biology class. When Lily came to the backyard, she discovered that the plants had become more lush and flourishing. The grapes on the wooden frame had turned into a bright red-purple hue. A foggy memory told her that they were less than a week from turning ripe. From time to time, Lighting would fly up and pick a bunch of ripe grapes for everyone. And that big and silly bird which had recently joined Border Town, bluntly sat on top of the shelf, raising its head to peck at the grapes and swallow them down. In the backyard under the shade sat His Royal Highness and Anna. They were happily chatting with each other, looking just like an intimate couple. But Lily knew, they were definitely not telling each other words of affection. In case she was to approach them to listen, she would definitely hear a bunch of unfathomable mysterious nouns belonging to a debate that she was unable to make any sense of. For example, about how the small balls looked like, how a cat could be living and dead at same time, matter turned into a wave, and so on. This was probably also the reason why Nightingale would always keep a distance of 5 meters away from them. After all, when listening to them for a long time, any person would definitely become drowsy. AI. Wendy was always waiting with Scroll. Whenever she met her, Wendy would show a gentle and soft smiling expression. Sometimes, she even felt that from the other's point of view she was seen as a child. Lily helplessly sighed, first looking at Wendy's chest, then bowed her head to look at her own. There was indeed worlds between them. When can they turn into that? Maybe then I won't be regarded as a child anymore. After all the witches had arrived, Lord Roland put 2 gray-black metal utensils on the table, claiming that they made it that with them it would be possible to see the tiny world of microscopy. Lily thought, maybe the object won't look the same after magnification, but that everything in the world is made up out of small balls? This had always been hard for her to believe. After all, how could rolling balls form a solid rock? His Royal Highness sent a guard to get a bucket of water, then took a few drops and placed them under the microscope, which was different from what Lily had expected. The water in the bucket was neither muddy nor was it dirty. Instead, it was so clear that she could see the sunshine reflecting on the bottom, as if there wasn't anything there at all. Is it really possible that you can see the flowing balls from under the microscope? Something is moving in the water. To her surprise, a sister shrieked, and the moment her voice fell, she shrieked again. It ran away. More than one, there seems to be a lot more. Good gracious, these are bugs? None of them look the same at all. This looks more like a transparent crab. Lily's heart suddenly suspended, not the small balls, but bugs? His Royal Highness had indeed lied. However, that there are insects is also very strange. Just look at the water, there is clearly nothing in it. When it was her turn, the little girl could no longer pretend to be indifferent. She headed toward the microscope and impatiently narrowed her eyes to take a look for herself. And then, she saw an incredible scenery. Just in the narrow illuminated area, she saw many bizarre objects recklessly moving about. Some had square shapes, while others' whole bodies were covered with hairs. Some looked like a mixed species of bugs and crabs, and others looked somewhat similar to the base of a grain of wheat. No matter which kind of strange shape they had, they were all mostly transparent, as if they had no skin or shell around them, in general, allowing to see the internal body structure clearly. Of course, these insects' stomach was almost just as empty as their surroundings. Your Royal Highness, are these really insects? Scroll asked. What you are seeing should be some primitive organism or single-celled algae. Calling them insects is not really appropriate. They should be assigned to the class of microorganisms. The prince explained. Microorganism? Yeah, they're also an independent life form, but their shape is much smaller. Apart from the two you are seeing, there are also even smaller bacteria and viruses. At present, the magnification of the microscope is not enough to permit you to see those two microorganisms. They are also the reason for food spoilage and a variety of other illnesses. The more His Highness Roland explained, the more spirited he became. These infinitesimally small life forms are everywhere, and there are many different kinds. Fortunately, the majority of them is vulnerable to high temperature, and that is the reason why we boil the water before drinking, cook the fish before we eat it, and do not reuse our bathwater. Although it was difficult for her to imagine that there were even smaller creatures, when she thought about that with drinking she will also swallow a lot of insects into her belly, Lily felt goosebumps all over her body. Hasn't His Royal Highness said that these humble little things are the culprits of food spoilage? If I can keep the bread and meat porridge fresh, that water should also be possible. Thinking until here, she couldn't help herself as she released her magic, covering the droplets under the microscope, causing unexpected changes to be born. She saw how the insects began to tremble, then began to quickly change their appearance. Their skin was no longer transparent, but seemed as if they had put on a purple armor. Then long tentacles began to grow on their whole body, and soon after, they started to swallow the insects in their surrounding which have not changed. No, that wasn't right. Instead of swallowing, Lily saw that they were assimilating each other at an alarming rate. Like a sharp sword, the tentacles stabbed into the body of other microorganisms which then assumed the same appearance as them. Not knowing whether it was an illusion or not, she still felt that these transformed organisms were still changing the invisible creatures, and it didn't take long until a little purple spot appeared within the water. After a few breaths, more and more of these purple spots appeared, gradually fusing into one piece, as if her field of vision was slowly being covered with a lavender-colored carpet. One by one the tentacle insects arranged themselves into rows, like a neatly organized army. As if they could feel her attention, they all raised their tentacles up, as if in salute. This was the first time that she saw the true face of her ability. Chapter 207 Mothers and Replicates. Within her world of fog, Nightingale waited for the witch's magic power to change. Within this black and white world, she rarely had the opportunity to see so many brilliant colors. Compared to the memory of the time when they were in the search for the holy mountain, the magic power within them had increased a lot. The unceasing practice each day not only allowed them to better control their ability, it also increased their magical reservoir. But Nightingale was most deeply moved by the expressions on their faces. With the Witch Cooperation Association, although Wendy was always gently encouraging them and Kara would always remain steadfast, but even with that, during the days they were in hiding, no one would get a restful sleep. Any wind that moved the grass was enough to rouse the sisters from their dreams. Under the constant chase of the church and the suspicion of the masses, they were never able to breathe easy. Even after entering the impassable mountain range, this stress hadn't been reduced by much. No one among them knew if they could really reach the holy mountain and obtaining their longed-for place to call home. Back then, the atmosphere within the camp was often very gloomy and most of the sisters had shown vacant and apathetic expression. But now, no longer needing to starve and no longer having to worry about the church's witch hunt, all of their faces had become filled with an unprecedented spirit. Seeing that everyone was relaxed and smiling naturally, Nightingale's heart also felt happy at the thought of their comfort. In the end, the holy mountain was not in the wilderness, but in this small border town. At that time, she felt a thread of magic shaking. A cloud out of a purple mist began to rotate, unceasingly surrounding and being drawn to a magical source, like a miniature storm. This shocking scene could only be seen by Nightingale. After recovering from her initial shock, she stared with wide-open eyes and held her breath, not wanting to miss any details like the time with Anna and Soraya. Today would be her first time to seeing the condensation of magic with her own eyes. At the center of this storm, Lily was standing. She was completely immersed in the microscopic world beneath the microscope, never noticing that the magic within her body had underwent a drastically change. The cloud of mist became more and more vigorous, steadily accelerating its rotational speed, appearing to become an entity on its own. But at the same time, this silhouette also began to fluctuate, no longer appearing in its original vortex shape. Finally, the magic was drawn inwards, condensing into a ball, and then gradually came to a stop. Her newborn magic power neither resembled Anna's solid and smooth cube, nor was it like Soraya's soft silk. It was only the size of a fist, its main body was round, but on top of it there existed 8 pairs of wriggling tentacles, 4 pairs at the bottom, 4 at the top. At first glance it looked like an insect. Roland never expected that he would receive such immediate results with the first fundamental biology lesson, and even less that the first witch to evolve her magic would be Lily. Because her ability was to preserve the freshness of food, in addition to the daily practice, Roland hadn't given her any other tasks. Her understanding of her ability also wasn't deep. After listening to Nightingale's full report, Roland remained calm and collected and just nodded. Waiting until the end of the lesson, so that he could ask Lily to stay behind. "What, you said that my ability has evolved?" Lily was also utterly astonished. "I didn't see those balls you had mentioned." "Of course not," Roland laughingly shook his head. "Those balls are thousands of times smaller than the microbes. Even granted that we bring the optical microscope to its limit, you will still be unable to see the balls which form all of matter." "Is that so? I thought that by understanding the ball theory it becomes possible to evolve our ability," Lily muttered. "I do not believe that everything in the world is formed out of small balls, something as hard as rocks and steel. If they were really made out of a lot of piled-up balls, they would have collapsed into a puddle of sand." So that's the reason, he thought. It seems that comprehending the microparticle theory is not the only way to promote the evolution of their ability. "In that case, what did you see?" Lily thought to herself. "Just several purple insects. I believe that they were summoned by my magic, and it could turn all of the organisms you spoke of into something with the same appearance." "Insects?" He slightly stunned for a moment. "And they were as big as a microorganism?" "Almost," she said, nodding. "Anyway, afterward I once again used only my eye to look at the water drop, and it was still as transparent and colorless as before. Then, next we should come to the real test." Because Lily's ability was not directly visible to the naked eye, unlike Anna's and Soraya's, it was also much harder to test. When seeing the neatly arranged microbes under the microscope for the first time, Roland became startled. It seemed as if they all had a collective consciousness, showing an incredible amount of synergy and consistency. Next were the sub-experiments, including its impact on the duration time of the magic and which influence the God Stone of Retaliation had. The testing continued for 3 days. Although the little girl was fond of bickering under normal circumstances, she still meticulously carried out Roland's instructions, regardless of her complaints. Through a large number of sample comparison, as well as discussion with Anna, he roughly figured out how Lily's new ability worked. Her purple variation was clearly divided into 2 major categories, mother and replica. After releasing her magic, the microorganism who changed on their own were the mothers. The characteristic of the mother organism was similar to Anna's black flame. As long as they were supplied with magic, they would continue to exist. Furthermore, the caster also wasn't allowed to distance themselves further than 5 meters. Otherwise, they would disappear on their own. Just like any other summon, they were also affected by the God Stone of Retaliation. Within the suppressing area of the stone, the mothers would instantly disperse. When the mother was in existence, the surrounding microorganisms would be assimilated into replicas in a short time. What made Roland feel incredible was that the replicas, which were the results of Lily's ability, were just like Soraya's coding, no longer vulnerable to the suppression of the God Stone of Retaliation. In simple terms, the creations that were transformed by Lily's mother organisms had become an entirely new life form, and this life form existed in reality. The replicated organism were assimilated by the mothers, and would take the initiative to transform other organism on their own. Yet some of the results made Roland feel very confused. It seemed that the assimilation process didn't go on endlessly. In some of the samples, into all of them were the equal number of replicas added, all of the microorganisms got transformed, while in some other samples, he could see the replicas and the non-variation of microorganisms live in peaceful coexistence. Due to the lack of more sophisticated observation instruments, this part apparently could only be guessed at. After discussing it with Anna, Roland got the tentative idea that the number of assimilation a replica could perform was related to its size. Lily's ability clearly did not distinguish between the different types of microorganisms. Thus a large number of replica produced by the mothers were created out of the too small to see viruses and bacteria, and also the with the microscope visible protist and single-celled algae. The former body of these replicas determined its assimilation ability. The larger the previous organism was, the more assimilation the replica could perform. However, a replica of a replica was unable to continue to live by further assimilate others. When the number of assimilation was exhausted, the last batch of replicas was only able to survive a day or so. Boiling the water would also kill most of the replica. In this regard they were no different than another microorganism. But the interesting thing was, that whenever there was a mother around, these replicas would gather like a swarm of insects gathered around their queen, and arrange themselves in a neat queue, just like soldiers waiting for their orders. Limited by means of observation, there were still many aspects of Lily's ability which were unknown. For example, whether the mothers and the replicas resembled bacteria and viruses in the regard that they had a variety of effects on other life forms, or if they could take the place of fungi and be used for the chemical industry and food production. It was a pity that currently the little girl was unable to make any sense out of these ideas, even less able to carry out his orders. Even though, the replicas had shown an immense development potential in the area of medical treatment. Even if they were unable to do anything else, as long as they were able to assimilate deadly bacteria or viruses, they could still play a significant part in the rapid anti-inflammatory and disinfection. This so-called medicament could pave the road for an entirely new era of medical developments. Chapter 208 I'm Truly a Fool. After wrapping her wet hair into a towel, Lily went back to her room. Although she had previously accused the prince of excessively pursuing pleasure, she had to admit, this bathroom thing was indeed fantastic. Standing underneath the shower and enjoying the ice-cold well water that was washing over her body, sweeping away the sticky and hot feeling of the scorching sun, gave the body a sense of being reborn after a busy day. However, being so carefree after the shower, she felt a hint of a guilty conscience. During the whole day, she had never restrained herself, instead she had given her sharp tongue free rein. But she now had to ask herself whether or not she should go to His Highness and apologize. Traitor! What? Lily lifted the hair glued to her front head. You obviously do not believe in that ball theory, but now you are the first to evolve your ability. Mystery Moon kneeled on the bed, with her upper body upright and her hand pointing at Lily. You are a huge liar. Lily rolled her eyes. I still do not believe that everything is formed out of small balls. How could that be? But Nightingale sister had said that your magic has condensed. That has nothing to do with those balls. She shrugged her shoulders and climbed into the bed grasping Mystery Moon's hand. His Royal Highness said that to evolve your magic you don't have to accept the theory of the balls. As long as you are able to understand your own magic deeply, it is possible that a fundamental change can happen to your magic. Really? Mystery Moon pouted. Anyway, that is what he'd said. In the Witch Cooperation Association, Mystery Moon had never been taken seriously, which resulting in her constant lack of self-confidence, was what Lily thought. Which was the complete opposite to how they treated me. After all, in times of food shortage, having the ability to preserve food is very important. But now I can finally understand your feelings, because since we've entered Border Town, my ability had become like chicken ribs, completely useless. She had constantly been afraid of being kicked out of the town, but the result was contrary to her concerns. His Royal Highness, the Prince, although he never assigned any additional task to her, his attitude to her and the other witches wasn't much different. Perhaps that was also the reason why Mystery Moon had changed, from being cautious out of a feeling of inferiority, to now becoming more and more daring. More than half of her cowering was because Kara had never actually paid any attention to her, even going so far as banning her from using her ability in the camp. The Mystery Moon frowned. How will I ever be able to understand my ability? His Highness had said that the magnetic fields are invisible, even the microscope aren't help with it. Don't ask me, I also don't understand mine, Lily yawned. In fact, I only know how my ability looks like, but what His Royal Highness said about those cells, bacteria, fungi. I don't understand any of that. He also said that he would write a textbook for me, she confessed helplessly. Spare me, I can't even read the words. I also want to become more powerful. Mystery Moon rolled over the bed. I also want to do more things for His Royal Highness. Lily sighed. You're obviously older, but you're behaving as if you're even younger than I am, really now. Maybe you should go and ask Sister Anna. Ask her? She suddenly stopped rolling. Yes, you are afraid to even waste the tiniest bit of His Highness' time, so the next best thing would be to go ask Sister Anna, said Lily. Within the whole town, with the exception of His Highness Roland, she is the one who will know the most. But Anna is very busy too. I heard that all the machines in the town are manufactured by her, Mystery Moon said hesitatingly. So you have to find her and ask during her free time, like after dinner, or ask her to help with heating up the bath water, or even just invite her to take a bath. Don't you have plenty time to ask? The little girl made some suggestions. What you said seems to be quite reasonable. Mystery Moon's eyes lit up. Then let's get some sleep, we have to get up early tomorrow. Lily finally untied the towel around her hair, and wiped away the hairs that have fallen into her face. Then finally, she laid her head on the pillow. You're the one who's going to blow the candle. Well, okay. Mystery Moon climbed to the end of the bed and blew the candle out. Good night. The next day, Lily did not go as she usually did to the kitchen or wheat warehouse to practice her ability, but instead sat down at the table and began to learn how to use the microscope. This was the new task given to her by His Highness. Before the arrival of the textbook, she should fully understand the types and shapes of the various kinds of cells and fungi and record their differences. It didn't matter if she couldn't write, painting pictures would also be sufficient. And according to His Royal Highness, Anna was also trying to enlarge the microscope's magnification. In case she could achieve a magnification effect of 400 times, then she could see even the smaller microorganism and bacteria. In the future, her practice content was no longer to keep food fresh, but to try to diversify the body of the mothers and their replicas. Regarding this point, Lily had some problems with comprehending it. Fortunately, His Highness had given her some ideas on what to practice, such as commanding them to mimic the appearance of a single cell, or to use her consciousness to destroy or improve the cells. Of course, this would only be possible if she had a full understanding of all kinds of the microscopic life forms. Although Lily did not know if she could achieve this, she at least had to try. What's more, exploring the unknown world was an interesting thing in itself. She'd worked on it until the evening, at which time Mystery Moon returned with a dejected expression. "What happened?" Lily asked curiously. "What did Anna say?" "She had said a lot." Mystery Moon threw herself onto the bed, but I could not understand a word of it. "She said that the magnetic field is everywhere and that the reason the compass can indicate direction was because we are inside of a huge magnetic field." "Does that mean that my ability is of no use at all?" "Not to mention the principle of the magnetic field, and the interdependence between moving charged balls and magnetic forces, and that the magnetic field can produce electricity. Does all this mean that if I cannot understand the ball theory I also cannot progress?" She mumbled softly. "Say, am I too stupid?" "Somewhat," Lily bluntly answered. "Traitor." Wendy was delighted that another sister of the Witch Union had gained a new ability. And Lily's evolution also increased the enthusiasm of the other witches. This evening after the end of the course, several people stayed behind and constantly pestered Scroll with questions. Even Maggie, after hearing that she could increase her ability by learning, just squatted down on the chandelier and listened honestly. There was only one person who was exception. When she went to the back of the room, with her Natural Science Theoretical Foundation book under the arm, she saw Nightingale lying on the table, focusing on something else. Wendy knew that whatever it was had nothing to do with learning. "So," she asked, "what are you doing?" "Distributing fish. Do you want one to eat?" said the Nightingale, while letting a fish dangling out of her mouth. "I just got them from the kitchen." "So many?" Wendy was surprised to see the table piled up with golden brown grilled fish, from where a delicious honey odor assaulted her nostrils. "Well, the chef saw that I came every day, so he just baked all the rest. Anyway, this food can be contained for a long time." She took out a small bag and put the fish into it. On top of the table already laid 5 or 6 similar bags, each of them stuffed to the state of bulging. Wendy suddenly understood what Nightingale was doing. She was preparing rations. The Witch Cooperation Association always had to be prepared to leave the town at a moment's notice, so they always had to have enough rations and to distribute among themselves, and they would carry their rations within those bags. Along the way, no matter how hungry they became, they could only eat their provisioned rations, in order to avoid a situation where their amount of food became insufficient. But since their arrival at Border Town, with its stable supply of regular meals, together with regular afternoon tea, none of the sisters had continued with it. Of course, for Nightingale, rather than preparing food, it would be more appropriate to call it preparing snacks. "Do not you read the book?" "I wouldn't understand it anyway. Just alone from hearing those theories and theorems my head already becomes dizzy." Nightingale swallowed the dried fish, then laughingly said, "Moreover, my ability is already enough. It doesn't matter to me if I won't be able to further evolve it." So, it was like that. Compared to her former self, at present Nightingale's eyes are sparkling. Within them, there is no reluctance or hesitation, only her incomparable nature. Lost people cannot make such an expression, Wendy thought. Nightingale must have found her goal. Whenever Nightingale has decided on her goal, her firm side, which came from her noble background, would show itself. This was also the case when she had faced Kara. But Wendy did not ask about it, because she truly believed that she would one day see the answer with her own eyes. Chapter 209 Convenience Market. "Stop." At May's shout, Irene stopped her downward slash at the vitals with the dagger. "You don't have to look so ferocious, although he is scum wicked beyond redemption, but he is still playing the role of your foster father. So, you have to show some hesitation together within your determination, and in the end you have to show an expression of both relief and peace. Come on, let's do it one more time." "Yes," Irene answered seriously. Since the first performance on the town square, already half a month had passed. She herself did not know why she still hasn't left. and instead even took part in the second drama. Today, the cast and crew were rehearsing their third show, The Diary of a Witch. Merely looking at the script of the play, this stage drama was destined to become something incomparable. Even when reading it for a second time, it was still such a wonderful and captivating story. It was a story that entirely forsook the romance between prince and princess, had a plot about the intrigues of the court, at the same time was full of praise for the courage, friendship and faith of the common people and the witches. Even though she had only read the script, she couldn't help but want to applaud the story. This play was also the reason May had claimed that she decided to stay in town for the time. But the real reason even she did not know. Irene grabbed the dagger and ferocious stabbed downward. Sam, who was playing the role of her foster father, released a miserable cry, "You actually," then his head fell to the side at a crooked angle, pretending to be gasping for air. A little exaggerated, May shook her head. "The position she had stabbed you is your chest. How can you have the time to scream and then raise your hand to catch Irene? You will become weak at once. This is the most common form of death, so don't tell me you had never heard anything about it in drama class." Sam's cheeks flushed red. "So sorry." Again, May stated expressionlessly. But Irene's performance was somewhat differently than May had expected. As long as she mentioned particular problems once, Irene would soon correct them. Whether it was her professional attitude towards the theater or her acting talent, both could be regarded as belonged to the top-notch category. It seemed that the title flower of the theater was not entirely based on the mutual flattery of the actors at the lowest rung. This time it was superb. With this, today's practice will end here. When the content of this scene was finally expressed smoothly and clear, May clapped her hands. "Ferlin Eltech should soon end his lecture, right? You should also go home and prepare the supper. After all, that's something water." "Tap water," Irene added with a smile. That tap water will be installed before dusk, so if you eat too late, then there will no longer be any water to take a bath with." May coughed twice. "Miss May, isn't the main point we end the rehearsal because Sir Knight does want to meet with you?" Rosia covered her mouth to hide her chuckle. "Currently it is still at least 1 hour until evening. I heard that Sir Carter is the prince's trusted subordinate. He is often within the castle, and also frequently accompanies the prince." Tina also shouted, but as West Border's most dazzling star, you do not lose. Wherever you are, you attracts all eyes." That's enough." Irene beckoned them with her hand to stop. "Miss May has not accepted Sir Carter yet." May raised her brow. "Could it be that I wasn't harsh enough in the recent performances? In the beginning, these two people didn't even dare to breathe loudly in front of me, but now they unexpectedly dare to play a joke on me. It seems that during the following day's next rehearsal, I will need to provide them with some bitterness to swallow. Otherwise, if it goes on like this, they really won't match my acting on stage. I will go first." "Many thanks for your instruction." Irene and the rest of the group lowered their heads in salute. Originally, only a theatrical instructor was eligible to enjoy such a courtesy, but May did not care. She only nodded in response, then left the rehearsal room, suddenly feeling the scalding hot outdoor air surrounding her. After going over to the tree at the community center, she sat in its shade and waited. It didn't take long before a man quickly walked towards her. It was Carter Lannis, the chief knight of the Lord of Border Town. "I hope you didn't wait for long," Carter sighed, touching the back of his head. "It wasn't long," May smiled faintly. "Let's go." At the first time, when he had invited me out, and I rejected him, he not only did not give up, but instead pensively paid me visits, which was completely inconsistent with the arrogance and indifference he displayed. In the end, he had me confused so much that I stayed. What the other's interest was, May knew very clearly in her heart, but the thought to settle down in this strange land confused and frightened her at the same time. Even when she had first come to Border Town for morning light, she had never had the intention to live here with him for a long time. In the stronghold, she was the moon that all the other drama stars surrounded, but here, there was no difference between her and the other members of the crew, quite the contrary, as Irene, also a teacher, was even more famous than she was. Following the broad street covered in shade, the two walked into the direction of the convenience market in the town center. This town, within 1 week, had completely changed its appearance. Last week, the outside of the district was still bare, but nowadays, it is verdant and lush. As long as it does not rain, they are building almost every day. If they aren't repairing the roads, they are building those houses. Normally they are even building both at the same time. Even in King City, it would be difficult to come across such a lively scene. The convenience market was located in the northern part of the square, which itself was also divided into 2 regions. It was separated in the middle by a line of parasol trees. On the right was the inexpensive area, with a layout similar to that of other markets, and there were wooden sheds open on all sides, only offering a wooden roof. They were selling some affordable iron tools and agricultural products. The former were things like farm tools, hammers, drills, and nails, while the later were things like eggs, beef, grapes, and other food she couldn't name. They were ordered in different categories. These goods were put in front of the stalls and each booth had a person appointed for looking after it. On the left side was the boutique area. Its sides was surrounded by brick walls, appearing more like a 1-story house. There they sold all kinds of goods, but the prices were much higher, so there were fewer people frequenting this area. On her second day at Border Town, she was dragged around by Irene once. If the night had not said that today there was a new rare product sale, she would rather have gone to the pub to drink 2 cups of iced wine. After their identity registration finished, the 2 of them stepped into the boutique area. Here the way of sale was also very strange. The whole market had only one entrance, and all the goods were placed on shelves from where you could freely choose them for yourself. They didn't accept bargaining, and no one tried to boast about the products. Instead, the prices and commodity introductions were written down on a parchment stuck to their side. After picking their favorite items, they had to pay at the door. May noted that the first row on the left had dozens of colored cups, which had the same pattern as she had seen last time, indicating that within 1 month these cups have not been sold at all. In case they were ordinary businessmen, they would be making a loss. So, she asked, was this market truly opened by His Royal Highness? Yes, Carter nodded. Because of this you can see some incredible merchandises. While speaking, he went to the 3rd row of shelves, such as this. This was the new rare commodity you were speaking about? May followed the knight and came to a stop at his side, only to see 5 or 6 light yellow boxes on top of the shelf. Each was about palm-sized, and she couldn't see what use they had at this time. This, however, is something His Highness had created himself, and now the castle's witches, attendants and personal guards, are all using it. Using it during the bath, you can easily remove the difficult-to-clean grease. After washing with it, you will experience a new kind of freshness. Furthermore, it will also give you a body the fragrance of roses. I dare to swear that when taking a shower, there is nothing more magical than this. The knight solemnly vowed. May turned her eyes aside to look at the parchment, only to see that on top of the tag stood 2 words, perfumed soap. Chapter 2:10 Go or Stay. Perfumed soap? She picked 1 block up and placed it near her nose to smell it, and indeed, she could make out the fragrance of roses. Yes, it is tough to imagine that to manufacture it, you begin with a thick paste, into which His Royal Highness also added perfume, to make it full of fragrance. May once more subconsciously glanced at the price written on the parchment. With a selling price of 25 silver royals for 1 block, it could be seen as a luxury product, but compared to even more expensive perfumes, the price was clearly set too low. Are you sure that it's perfume? When I performed in King City, there was once a powerful nobleman who gave me 3 bottles of perfume. Each of those bottles of perfume was only the size of the thumb, but their price was still more than 5 gold royals. For such a large piece of soap, you have at least add half a bottle of it, right? Is that so? Carter got startled. Perfume is actually so expensive? Of course, May gave him a look. It is one of King City Alchemy Association proudest products. Except for crystal glass, perfume is their best-selling product. I'd heard from other people that besides the tribute they paid the royal family, they were able to let nearly 1,000 bottles flow into the market each year. Individuals who can afford such a luxury belong to the upper nobility or are wealthy merchants. In case I hadn't gotten it as present, It would be absolutely unlikely that I would ever purchase a bottle of perfume which costing as much as my salary from several plays. But I have seen how His Royal Highness has used the perfume, and it didn't seem to be a rare material. Listening to him, it appeared to be made out of sugar cane? Seeing the puzzled look on May's face, Carter added, a sugar cane is just like a sweet stick. It is a typical crop of the fjords, which looks like a stick. When you bite into it, you get a mouthful of sweet water. Currently, it is only planted in the castle's backyard, but next time when I see His Royal Highness, I will ask him if I can take one out. Once again, it was His Highness the Prince. Since May had come to this town, the name she had heard the most of was Ronald Wimbledon. Whether it was Irene or Cater, whenever they talked about the changes happening in Border Town, they would always mention him. It seemed that His Highness was omniscient and there was nothing he didn't know. Furthermore, all of these new things had been created by him. Does there really exist such a learned person in the world? She couldn't believe it. After all, even if they were smart, learning all this knowledge would still require time. Whether it was in King's City or Longsong Stronghold, the people that were recognized as scholars were all old men with white hair. The folk of the Western Territory even had the phrase, the longer the beard, the broader the knowledge. But the prince was only 20 years old, so how could it be that he knew all these things? Even when thinking this way, May's face still showed her usual expression. No, if it could be used to make perfume, it has to be a very rare crop. Especially the perfume formula, that could be sold to any alchemic workshop for an incredibly high price. You must never make discreet inquiries about this to His Highness, even in case you see it, you shouldn't speak about it. All right, Carter said and took a handkerchief, putting 4 pieces of soap into it. Will you really buy so many of them? The most a person can buy are 2 of these. So we will pretend to buy them separately and when we leave I will give them all to you. Let's first leave before you start disagreeing. The knight raised his hand to interrupt May who wanted to say something. When I use mine up, I can still go to His Highness to ask for new ones, but when they are sold out here, you never know when they will get new goods. So, by taking these 4, you can use them for a very long time. When May saw her counterpart's serious expression, it seemed as if her heart suddenly started burning. And for a long time, she just pursed her lips, not saying another word, just silently watched how the knight wrap up the perfume soup. Since we are already here, let's look at some other commodities, he laughingly said as he held the bundle. When she returned to her home in Border Town, the outside skies had already become dim. The last light of the day falling through the curtain decorated the room with a touch of orange. Since she had stayed to perform the second drama, May had received the same set of rooms as Irene. Although it wasn't very large, it was still fully furnished. After placing the novelty goods she'd bought from the convention market one by one on the table, there was an addition to the 4 perfumed soaps along with a bottle of wine. This bottle of wine and the common wine found in pubs were different. It had almost no color and was instead pure and transparent with no difference to water. She remembered that according to the product's description it was called white liquor, having a higher concentration of alcohol. It wasn't suitable to be ingested in larger amounts. White liquor, she smiled, looking at it from its outer appearance, it really suited its name. Pulling out the wooden cork, May poured herself a cup. Raising the cup, a burst of flavor hit her face and entered her nose directly, making her frown. However, after the first strong scent, a bouquet of delicious flavors entered her nose. They were sweet and mellow, not like the inferior watered wine from the taverns. As a result of devoting herself to acting and the high amount of attention that gathered, May seldom went to the pubs. When a play became a great success, and the theater collective went to celebrate, only then would she follow them to go drink 2 cups of wine. Making sure that she never reached the state of becoming drunk where she'd be unable to speak, as she had witnessed numerous actors who got so drunk that they forgot all sense of self-control. Instead, she was always controlling her drinking so that it would never affect her mind. However, today May had a strong impulse to want to get drunk. Otherwise, she would have never bought such expensive liquor against Carter's advice. Wanting to try the story she had heard from other actors, that when they got drunk, they would be able to shield of all distraction and concerns, seeing the true answer that lay at the bottom of their heart. May closed his eyes, raised the cup to her head and poured the drink into her mouth. Immediately a hot spicy sensation exploded in her throat, causing her to directly spurt out the liquor again, and to cough out until tears arose. Hell, is this thing really wine? Waiting until the burning sensation had completely faded, she bit her lip and tried once more. This round, she only dared to take a sip of the liquor. Once again, a spicy flavor appeared, but this time it was followed by an intense richness and mellowness. When those two flavors mixed together, she actually couldn't say if it was a good drink, but it brought a kind of strange sensation with it. Around a quarter of an hour later, May felt a dizzy feeling overlaying her mind. She took a fist-sized box from her pocket and opened its lid, and saw herself in a bright mirror. This mirror was different from her previous bronze mirrors or the thin silver mirrors. Its surface was smooth without a scratch and her reflection was very clear, presumably making it very valuable. Within this mirror, May could see her flushed cheeks and her confused eyes. It was a gift given by the night as they parted. She'd wanted to refuse, but the other side had turned away so fast that he hadn't given her the opportunity to give it back. As he walked away, he once more turned around and waved goodbye to her. Speaking earnestly, when Carter Lannis shut his mouth, his appearance can absolutely be regarded as being impeccable. But if he wasn't such a chatterbox, I might not have stayed behind. So, should she really take root here? Far away from the bustling city, starting once more in this remote town, where beside the few people in the crew, no one else knew her identity. The fear of the unknown only made it harder for her to make up her mind. May put the letter on the table she had received several days ago, and spread it out. It had been forwarded to her by the Prince and Irene. The writer was Longsong manager Petrov. From the letter, she learned that the Stronghold Theater had announced that her current whereabouts were unknown and that Petrov hoped that she would soon return to Longsong Stronghold to continue her performance. His Highness the Prince hadn't concealed this news and instead given her the right to choose. After draining the rest of the cup, May's vision gradually became dizzy. She staggered to the desk, spread out a piece of paper and began writing a reply. Within her overlapping surging train of thoughts, she saw the Stronghold Theater, Irene, Ferlin Eltek, the thundering cheer of the crowd in the town square, and those third-rate actors who lost their self-control after performing together with her. Eventually, these images all slowly faded, leaving only the memory of Carter Lannis behind, as he invited her with a grin. "Hello, Miss May I have a drink with you?" Chapter 211 Light Industry. Roland sat at his desk and was reading with great interest through the recent report of the First Army from his chief knight. Compared to his meticulous appearance from several months ago, nowadays Carter's iceberg-like face often carried some other emotions, letting him appear much less calm, and instead giving him an aura of expectation and eagerness. Most probably this has something to do with the Star of the West, Roland thought. About the event of Carter's and May's recent stroll, Roland had also heard about it. After all, as one of the top members of the First Army, he also represented the army, so every movement would naturally be noticed. Not to mention May, the woman walking at his side, belonged to the kind that would draw the attention of all men to herself. When they had appeared side by side on the streets of Border Town for the first time, his guards had immediately passed along the news to his ears. Regarding this kind of matter, Roland didn't really mind it. Carter was roughly 2 to 3 years older than he was. So it was reasonable to say that it was strange that he still wasn't married. And if he could actually find his other half in the Western Territory, it wasn't that bad, as long as it didn't interfere with his work. According to the Knight's report, the First Army had been equipped with about 200 revolving rifles, adding almost a dozen with every day. In fact, if the raw materials were sufficient, Anna's production capacity could be increased by several times. But at the same time she was also in charge of the refining pig iron into steel and manufacturing the steam engine, which was slowing her down. However, this speed was still acceptable. After all, the First Army was only 600 people strong, so another 1.5 months would be enough to entirely replace all their weapons. Furthermore, before the next expansion of the population, the military size couldn't be further expanded anyway. Another point of the report was the formation of the Second Army. In order to make the training convenient as well as maintain their secrecy, Roland had the people recruited from Longsong's stronghold all incorporated into the Second Army. Currently, they were all undergoing disciplinary training, which followed the same pattern as the military's training. Then it would be time for ideological education in the evening, in the attempt to let these people as soon as possible think of themselves as the protector of the Western Territory, implanting in them the belief that their loved ones' safety needed to be protected by them. At present, the training of the Second Army is progressing well. The current estimation is that they should be ready to start with the shooting practice in a week. By that time, enough weapons should have been replaced, making it possible to have a flintlock to match every hand. Carter concluded. This was the advantage of guns. To train a cold weapon soldier, at least 1 year's time was needed. To teach a knight, 5 or 6 years had to be spent on training, while soldiers equipped with guns could already be dispatched on military missions after only a month of training. Furthermore, the longer a battle lasted, the bigger advantage of firearms became. After all, pulling a trigger was much safer than fighting with a sword. During the shooting practice, the supervisors have to pay attention to the number of guns, how many have been given away and how many of them come back. The same applied to the gunpowder. When it was distributed for the training, the veterans of the first arm would be responsible for its supervision. Yes, he nodded. Very well, Roland dismissed him with a wave. That was all. You must be busy now as well. Your Highness, Carter hesitated. Last time you said that the perfume mixed with the soap was made out of sugar cane, was that true? Yes, the prince said, sitting up in his chair. What's the matter? That sugar cane, is it expensive? No, they are just some common crops. I've heard people say that a thumb-sized bottle of perfume could be sold for 5 gold royals in King City. Carter scratched his head. If this is the case, shouldn't manufacturing the sugarcane perfume bring a huge income to the town? 5 gold royals? Roland got startled. He had never considered this point. Recalling the previous life in the palace, the fourth prince had never cared about the price of commodities. It was even more the case with perfume, something with which he had less contact. Only women would prefer a trinket that only delivered a nice fragrance. His initial motivation to make perfume was his wish for fine perfumed soap. Otherwise, by only having running water and no bathroom soap, it felt like there was something that was missing. The sensation of having his whole body covered with bubbles. If a small bottle of perfume could be sold for several gold royals, it was indeed a pretty good business idea. Unlike coated mirrors, the raw material of sugar cane and flowers were much cheaper than crystal glass was. Thinking it through, Roland laughed. This idea isn't bad, I will consider it. His Royal Highness, the sugar cane, can I take one out of the castle with me? Asked the knight with a look full of expectation. It won't hurt. Hearing him speak in this manner, Roland could immediately guess as to what he wanted to do with it. After all, this was the western border. Unlike the port of Clearwater, the crops of the fjords relatively rare here. So it was a good choice as a gift when asking a lady from the west out. They are growing on a wall in the backyard, just pick some for yourself. Thank you, Your Highness. Carter saluted. Afterward, Roland called for Berev. Still calling him assistant minister wasn't quite appropriate anymore. As City Hall's #1 figure, he was already regarded as Border Town's premier minister. After Berev took his place, Roland roughly described the perfume business plan. Do you think this could be something we can earn large sums of gold with? He did not reply immediately, but later asked with wide open eyes, Your Highness, are you sure that perfume is produced out of the sweet crops? Don't you also use the perfumed soap? The reason for its fragrance is that I had mixed the perfume inside. Roland spread his hands out. It is indeed true that these raw materials are of little value. But I never knew that the perfume in King City was so expensive until Carter brought it up. Far more than that, Your Highness. Berev said excitedly, perfume is King City Alchemist Workshop's top-secret product. Every year there are approximately 1,000 bottles, only a small part of it is sold in King City. The rest is sold to the other cities in Grey Castle. There they can raise the price by 20 to 30%, but in case they sell it to the fjords or other kingdoms, the price would almost be doubled. To prevent the merchants from making a profit out of the difference in prices, the association not only firmly controls the perfume prices in other places, they even assign all the merchants by themselves. So in case you could produce perfume, even if you only sold it to Redwater City or Fallen Dragon Ridge, you would definitely obtain a generous payback. So, that's how it was. Your 20 years serving as an assistant of the finance minister wasn't for nothing, Roland thought. Regarding the commodity prices and current market situation, Bhairav is indeed magnificent. With this information, Roland formed a preliminary plan in his mind. There were many ways to make perfume. The simplest method was to mash the petals or herbs with unique flavors and let them soak inside alcohol, letting the alcohol dissolve the plants, and leaving an aromatic oil remaining. Lastly, the remaining remnants will be filtered out and diluted with water. The alcohol came from the juice of the sugar cane, while for the aromatic oil they could use roses, or the more commonly rosemary and vanilla. However, since it was necessary to achieve mass production, the best choice would be to let leaves use her magic to transform a plant to directly secreting this fragrant oil. In addition to perfume, the industry could also produce white sugar and liquor. Also, a lot of consumables would be needed, and their profit would be less than what was gained from the perfume, but if sold to the townspeople at a low price, it would enrich their diet, which could be regarded as a significant step forward for the people's welfare. Roland's main reason for the slow development of the light industry was due to the shortage of a workforce, and the difficult to earn high profits with a small-scale production of daily necessities. Because of this, a limited population investing into heavy industry production would be the most cost-effective approach. Since the manufacture of perfume was incredibly profitable, maybe he could take advantage of this opportunity to make up for the shortcoming in environment. Chapter 2:12 Caravan and New Information. It was already the second month of summer, and as scheduled, Margaret arrived on the day of midsummer. This time, the amount of ships brought by the business group was far more than the pier could accommodate, so many boats now had to dock by the river and wait for the other ships that were in front of them to finish unloading, and allow them to access the pier for themselves. This caused Roland to realize that the town's pier would have to be expanded. This month, Greycastle Industrial Company has finally completed their task. By reducing the scrapping rate to 40%, they had successfully produced 3 steam engines for the day of delivery. Although compared to the current third generation used in Border Town, the ones the factory produced for foreign trade were lacking in power, leaked air, were noisy, rattled and had other aspects that made them of a much lower quality. But compared to the former number of produced machines, it was still a great deal of progress. The Crescent Moon Bay caravan brought an artisan team of 300 as had been arranged. Roland placed all of them in the industrial park at the southern side of the Redwater River. In addition to building a new wooden factory besides the original plant, he also ordered Carl to build an employee dormitory near the river. So that they could finish these facilities within a month, all of the huge logs needed were transported to the scene and then cut by Anna along with Carl's technical guidance. Like this, the originally most time-consuming task of processing the wood was completed in just 2 days. When teacher Carl saw Anna's new ability, he was stunned. In just 6 months, this weak and quiet girl had become so self-confident and seemed to always be in high spirits. At the castle, Roland held a sumptuous dinner, welcoming the arrival of the business group. At the same time, it was also the first time that white liquor appeared in their line of sight. "Every time we come here you will have developed new stuff." Margaret really did not lie to me, Hogg yelled. "Even the wine is so out of the ordinary." "This white liquor," Margaret reminded. "Yes, white liquor. Compared with this ale and wine are absolutely bland and tasteless," and with a grin, Hogg tossed the cup of liquor down. "Your Highness, this stuff, you must sell me a few boxes of it. I think its flavor is too hot, or to say it differently, the fruit wine is more suitable for me." The businesswoman smiled and shook her head. Roland smiled. "That has to do with personal preferences. The high concentration of distilled liquor isn't with everyone's taste. I also don't plan to spread it out, but since I happen to have made some, I thought I could let everyone have a taste." In this era brewing and drinking wine was still the mainstream, but distilling alcohol clearly offered a great potential to open up a new market. Like the white liquor, rum, whiskey, and vodka were all distilled spirits with higher alcohol content. And together with these distilled spirits, they also came the corresponding string attached to the bartending culture. However, for the present, it was still too early to open up this industry in Border Town. Your Highness, I have brought some news with me according the matter you mentioned in your previous letter, Margaret began. Now, after the church has taken over the kingdom of Endless Winter, they haven't brought up many changes. Currently they are facing a very strong resistance of the Wolf-Shark Kingdom. Because of this they have gathered all their troops at the Broken Tooth Castle, but even with them they have not been able to take a step forward during the last 2 months. In addition, the Kingdom of Dawn has sent a message to Grey Castle, that the church goal should be to eliminate the witches. Instead they want to take over the 4 kingdoms. They suggested that the 2 countries should establish an alliance, expelling the forces of church out of the kingdom, and jointly fighting against the holy city of Hermes. How did the King City respond? Roland asked. The kingdom's prime minister, Marquis Wyke, has immediately refused this proposal, and even denounced the other side for speaking nonsense. Margaret shrugged her shoulders. This matter has caused a large commotion in King City. Even the nobility is unable to reach a consistent view. As far as I know, many people are in support of the idea of an alliance. After all, at present, the church hasn't shown a sign that they will return the sovereignty to the successor to the Kingdom of Eternal Winter. Did Timothy not step forward? The answer was certainly to incite Timothy. At the moment he himself is rushing with his army to the east. Margaret showed a somewhat dignified expression. I heard that there was a massive fleet east of the Seawind region, which attacked and looted the eastern coast. They stopped at nothing, even the churches hadn't been spared, and there were also many merchants of the fjords who met with disaster. Many people have now become fugitives in the eastern region, Hogg and I have already given shelter to many of them. Margaret then added, they said that the looters were no longer only snatching just money. Nowadays they are even taking people with them, and after everything that could be moved was taken, they would burn everything that was left down. It seems that they want to turn the whole eastern territory into a white land. This is absolutely a severe blow to the eastern aristocracy who had recently been subdued by Timothy. Normally, hearing that Timothy was suffering under massive attack should be a joyous message, but when he heard that the other side even captured the population, Roland's heart was hit by waves of pain. Those who were able to escape. Are you interested in them? Margaret lightly smiled. After reading the letter, I already guessed that you might want to buy a large number of slaves to enrich the workforce in your territory. However, compared with the foreign refugees from the Kingdom of Endless Winter and the Wolf-Shark Kingdom, the refugees of Grey Castle may not be willing to sell themselves into slavery. I do not need them as slaves. As long as these people are willing to come to Border Town and settle down, there will be food and housing for them, and they will also be paid for their labor. Roland corrected. He also realized that this was a good opportunity to expand his number of people, even though the news arrived slightly late. How many people are there? Most of the robust and powerful refugees have already been taken in by the nobility and caravans, but there should still be nearly 10,000 people gathered outside of King's City. However, most of them are younglings or women. Well, I'll still send someone on the way to screen them, the prince said. In case I want to take them, do I need to deal with the officials of King's City? No, you don't. Margaret waved her hand to emphasize her words. They will be ever grateful to have someone take those people away. Otherwise the food they have won't be enough. In the event that the number continues to increase, it might even become possible that the food shortage could lead to riots. After the dinner, Roland returned to his office and called for Theo, his personal guard. This incident made him aware of how backwards his intelligence system currently was. If he had received knowledge about the refugee problem immediately, he could have done the preparations earlier. In the end, allowing him to bring even more people to Border Town. At present his understanding of the outside world laid only on the information he got from the caravans that arrived once a month, and a rate like that was simply unable to meet with his demands. Even with his stationed army in Longsong Stronghold, which had been establishment as a relay post, he could only monitor the western region. If he really wanted to compete for the throne of Grey Castle, he would have to extend his intelligence network to cover the whole kingdom, or even better, the whole of the mainland. Right now, Roland did not have a sufficient number of loyal and devoted subordinates that he could use to establish a complete intelligence network, not to mention sending spies to all parts of the country to work as his secret agents. Therefore, he first started with laying down the foundation by sending some people over to King's City, and let them collect information from the city and the outer regions. It wasn't needed that they start with detailed monitoring, but this way he could still at least receive a rough understanding of the overall situation and wouldn't have to be passive any longer as with today. Being aware of Theo's influence on King's City's Black Street rats, the prince knew that he was the best candidate for the job. "You want me to follow the caravan to King's City?" Theo gawked in disbelief. "That's right, you will have two duties. Your first mission is to meet up with the refugees of the eastern region. I will send a group of 100 or so soldiers with you who will be in charge of the escorting them back to border town. I will inform you later about the specific conditions of the screening, but that will still be before the caravan leaves." "Yes." "Second, when the flood of refugees has calmed down, you will stay behind in King's City and starts to collect information from everywhere in the city for me. Since you are already used to dealing with the underground rats, you should be clear about how you have to go through with it. Furthermore, Margaret's caravan will be fully supporting you. In case a task requires you to spend some money, you can go to her. Compared with your task of going to Redwater City to spread the news about the witches, this time your funds will have no upper limit." He then put a revolver on the table. "Pay attention, and protect yourself. I hope that I hear some good news from you soon." Chapter 213 The Paddler Blueprint. 4 days later, the merchant fleet set sails leaving the docks. Theo and 100 members of the First Army went along with the ship, setting out to King's City. During these days, Roland and Margaret had come to an agreement. Theo could come to her shop to request any amount of gold royals. The amount would then be deducted from the price of the steam engines. In addition, Roland also needed to pay an additional 1% of interest. This time the amount of saltpeter and ore was 2 times that of the previous transport, but with the deposit for the transformation of steamboats, Roland had still received more than 2,200 gold royals, which was a monthly sales income Ronald almost wouldn't even dare to dream of during the months of demons. Even by selling 1 month of ore, he would also only have gotten an income of 300 gold royals. When the caravan had left, Maggie's day for temporarily leaving Border Town had also arrived. In accordance with the agreement made with Ashes, she would travel to the islands in the fjords, bringing them news about the West. Roland wrote an especially long letter which Maggie had to take along. In addition to expressing his wish for cooperation, he hoped that the 5th princess could dispatch some auxiliary witches who could come and help him. In the letter, he did not address himself as her brother but as the Lord of Border Town, and now after killing Duke Ryan, Lord of the Western Territory. Although the possibility that the other side would go along with his requests was minuscule, he still wanted to give it a try. Anyway, spending some time writing a few more words wasn't an effort at all. The farewell took place in the castle's backyard. All of the witches were present. Nightingale gave her a small bag of dried fish, while Lightning gave her a package of ground pepper. The other witches were also reluctant to part. They all stepped forward to caress and stroke her feathers, and hugged her goodbye, acting the same as if it was time for a battle and they could be parted forever. "Rest assured, Goo," Maggie said, raising her head. "I'll be back soon, Goo." "What if Tilly does not allow you to come back?" Lightning asked worriedly. Goo, the pigeon shrank her neck and pondered over it for a while, then shook her feathers. "In that case, I'll just sneak back, Goo." "Then we have come to an agreement," the little girl promised earnestly. "If you come back, I'll personally catch a bunch of birds and roast them for you to eat. There is also the honeycomb we discovered last time. I will wait for you to come back so that we can pull it out together. Goo." She nodded again and again. "Has reached an agreement, Goo." What good words could I say? Roland, standing at the side, was also overtaken with emotion. "It has only been a month, but Maggie has already become one of us." "Well done, Lighting." "Well, goodbye everyone, Goo." Maggie flapped her big wings. After running a few steps she slowly rose up, circled them 2 times, then gradually disappeared into southeastern horizon. She will reach the island smoothly. When Roland saw the small point slowly disappear, he couldn't help but worry about her. Yes, there won't be any problems, Lightning agreed without hesitation, then crooked her head. There shouldn't be, right? After sending Maggie away, Roland quickly went back inside, busying himself with the daily work. This time, he wanted to draw the complete set of plans for the conversion of the two ships for the Crescent Moon Bay caravan. They would be the world's first steam-powered paddle ships. Due to them using a single power source, it was not needed to change the trunk, directly connecting the steam-powered paddle to the wheel. Using some routes to control the intake of the air pipeline, and with that also controlling the ship. To slow or stop the boat, it would only be needed to close the inlet pipe, while the excess steam would leak from the exhaust port. During the stopping procedure, the fire would still continue to burn, making it very easy to drive forward again. The principle behind the plan wasn't complicated, so Roland was able to draw out a rough model fairly quickly. In case he wanted to get an accurate production drawing, he would have to go to the dock to measure the precise size of the boats. At this time, Anna entered the office, carrying a book. "What's going on?" Roland put the goose writing brush down while being unable to restrain a smile. "I finished this book." With this word she put the book with the title Theoretical Foundation of Natural Science down on his desk. Seeing this, Roland's smile suddenly became somewhat stiff. This was simply too exaggerated. Just within a few months, she was able to read the complete mathematical and physical knowledge of high school level. He didn't even need to ask if his counterpart had understood everything, because when Anna spoke of reading she meant complete understanding, or she would certainly take another look, or simply come to ask him. "Are you drawing the blueprints for replacing the sail with a steam engine as a power source?" Anna's attention was quickly attracted to the sketch laying on the table, but what? "Are these two wheels similar to rowing puddles? When they rotate, they can produce a pushing force, but half of them are exposed, which is a huge waste of power. So why not just completely immerse them in the water?" Roland stared at her with his mouth wide open, not knowing how to reply. Since people who are born with knowledge do not exist, does that mean that just by looking at the scratches she was able to make this judgment within these few moments? Thinking about this possibility suddenly rose his interest. "Then can you tell me how you would improve it?" For a moment Anna pondered about it, then she raised the brush and began to draw on the paper. Roland supported his chin with his hand while appreciating with keen interest her carefully drawing attempt. Her bangs fastened with his hair clip swayed back and forth with her every move. Her long slender eyelashes beat twice and her white cheeks revealed a natural rosy tint to them. Although, from this angle he could only see the side of her face, but in contrast to the bright background, her profile from the bridge of her nose to her chin and on to the neck formed a perfect and gentle curve. "Do you want to eat some fish?" Nightingale scrambled over and put her hands between the two. Anna nodded and took the offered snack. "Thank you." When his line of sight was blocked, Roland coughed twice and then had to look back to those paintings on the desk once more. Initially, Anna had tried to completely embed the wheel in the water. However, this way meant it would become difficult to observe the wheel's position when it came close to the shore, making it easy for it to hit the pier or the dock. She then put the wheel at the back end of the ship, which was the standard practice, but with this the transmission setting became much more complex. After all, the bulky steam engine was not suitable to be placed at the end of the hull. In that way, the drive shaft and gearbox would end up occupying quite a huge part of the hull. When Roland saw drawings of her newest concept, he once again couldn't help himself from exclaiming in admiration for his counterpart's keen thinking capability. The sketch Anna was currently considering came infinitesimally close to the single-axis propeller layout. The steam engine was set at the bottom of the hull and the drive shaft extended out of the hull to below the waterline. To its end, she had connected 4 square blades, which gave it an appearance that was similar to a windmill. "I do not know if it can be done this way," she hesitated. "But, it's reasonable to say that by keeping the paddle at tilt, it can produce horizontal pushing force. However, by reducing the wheel to our blades, I do not know if it can generate enough power to move the ship. Of course it would be possible, it just needs a slight modification." Roland took the quill out of Anna's hand, and draw the propeller's original design, compared to a windmill shape. this shape of the blade is more suitable for rotating within the water. Your train of thought is entirely correct, but the contractual requirement is to transform the ship into a paddler, so we will still keep with the first method. This has nothing to do with technology, it is simply a business strategy. He paused and then asked, I'm going to measure the hull, do you want to come with me? Anna blinked her blue eyes, Mastering the theory and then putting it into practice is the best way to learn. Nightingale? When Anna followed the prince to the door, she saw that Nightingale was still looking at those blueprints on the table, making it unable for her to not open her mouth. You can go first, I'll come around immediately. While holding the sketches in her hand, Nightingale repeatedly compared them, coming to the conclusion, didn't they just change the position where the wheel is placed? Chapter 2:14 The Travel to King City. The merchant fleet followed a branch of the Redwater River on its way north and after passing Silver City entered into the Grand Canal to King City. Theo remembered that he had once read in the Chronicles of Grey Castle that 200 years ago, everything around here had been a wasteland. In order to transport the mined silver in the nearby mines back to King City, Wimbledon I had summoned stonemasons and nearly 10,000 handymen. After 20 time-consuming years spent digging, they finally opened a direct connection between the silver mines and King City. However, during the construction process a new city had also gradually formed itself around the silver mines, which was then later named Silver City by the late king. But the scene that unfolded itself in front of him was completely different from the view of 200 years ago. This was no longer a wasteland. Instead, both sides had now been covered with lush farmland that slowly transformed itself into a village. Seeing this scene made Theo think of the Kingdom Avenue which connected Border Town and Longsong Stronghold. When that road was finished, he believed that the surrounding hills would also become more densely populated. I heard you that you have previously already lived in King City? Suddenly a woman's voice sounded from behind him. When Theo turned his head, he saw that the voice belonged to Margaret, the owner of the caravan. He nodded. Before I became a palace guard, I have been living in the inner city. How do you feel about returning to your old home? Honestly speaking, not bad, he said. If it were not for the order of His Royal Highness, I'd rather stay in Border Town. Although King City seems to be such a lively place, it makes people develop a suffocating feeling living there. Which is particularly the case because of the lower nobility, Theo thought. Is that so? Margaret smiled. How much do you know about His Highness Roland? What's going on? Hearing this question let his heart slightly shiver with cold. I think he is really an incredible person. Of course, many bad rumors are flowing around in King City, you also should have heard a lot of them. However, in Border Town, it is nothing like those rumors said. His behavior and ideas are unpredictable. She paused. If the steam engine was accomplished through his knowledge and skills, why then, are even the soldiers trained by him so out of the ordinary? Speaking of the First Army, Theo glanced in the direction of the soldiers who were sitting on the deck, taking into account that their activities in King City had to be hidden as much as was possible. They were not equipped with guns, nor were they wearing a unified military uniform. Instead, their armor had been replaced with all sorts of different leather armors, and the only weapons they carried were the wooden spears on their back. They looked just any other caravan guard. For most of them, it was the first time that they were away from the Western Territory, and because of this, they were all curiously looking around and talked with each other about what they saw, but no one had yet taken off his shoes or laid down on their arms. On the other hand, the mercenaries of the caravan, to avoid the sun, many of them had left the deck and went into the cabin, leaving only 3 or 4 people behind on the deck who in turn have taken off their shoes and laid flat in the shade with their hands stretched out beside their body. I am not quite clear, Theo reluctantly answered. It wasn't that he was trying to hide something, it was simply that he didn't know the answer. After coming to Border Town, the 4th prince had become very different compared to his former self. Probably His Royal Highness from before was just a disguise. Is it? Margaret said nothing more, keeping silent for a moment, and then she suddenly reached out with her hand and pointed in the distance. Look, that's the city wall. We will be arriving soon. At the end of his field of vision he could make out a fuzzy natural gray. Just by standing here and looking, he could already feel the magnificence of the city walls. the city walls were the most outstanding work of the stonemason guild before they were dissolved. Both its height and thickness were second to none in the kingdom of Grey Castle. He had even heard that the walls had rooms and channels that offered places for nearly 1,000 soldiers to rest, making it possible to guarantee an uninterrupted patrol and fast support. When the walls became clear for Theo to see, the figures of the fugitives also entered his field of vision. A large number of civilians had gathered in the outskirts of King's City. They had built simple sheds along the walls. In front of those sheds, many fires were burning, sending white smoke into the air. They were all seemingly boiling rice porridge. For now, these people had not yet run out of food, and their facial expressions were also still good. But King City would certainly not support them with free food forever. As soon as the aristocrats had selected their workforce, they would send their troops to drive these people away. "How do you plan to go through with your task?" Margaret asked curiously. "Will you send out the soldiers given to you by His Highness to pull the people in by propaganda?" No, such a plan would have a low efficiency. Moreover, it would be very easy to come to the unwanted attention of others. Theo shook his head. "If you want to get something done in King City, you either bribe an official or hire the rats. About this you should already have a profound understanding of." "Sure," she laughed, "I wanted to help you with 1 or 2 words, but it seems it is unnecessary. So, if there is a need for money, just come to me." Margaret handed him a sign. "As long as you reveal this, one of my shop managers will immediately contact me. Of course, everything under 100 gold royals can be directly taken." "Thank you." Theo took the token. It was a deep red stone, engraved with some lines he had never seen before. "There is no need to be so polite," she chuckled. "The money will be repaid to me by His Highness, with interest." After arriving at the canal's pier, Theo ordered the soldiers of the First Army to stay on the outskirts and wait for news of him. Their only current task was to avoid the sight of King City patrols as well as they could, while Theo himself entered the city together with the caravan. At the gate, he noted that the inspection of the guards had become a lot stricter than before. Apparently, they didn't want any of the fugitives, who were able to escape from the east, to enter the city. After entering the city, the first thing that came to his eyes was a row of towering gallows. Hanging on them were 4 women with their hands tied on their back, releasing an awful stench due to their exposed to the scorching sun. Seeing such a scene let Theo immediately frown. "Timothy is performing witch hunts in the city, and they are the unfortunates who get caught," Margaret sighed, "but that is not accurate. Of some of the witches the nobility just got bored, they just took advantage of this opportunity. It's hard to say what is better, continuing to be imprisoned in a dark room without light, or being freed from the pain as soon as possible. No matter what, I wish for them that they can rest in peace." During the last half-year at Border Town, Theo had realized that witches were not as unforgivable as the church had preached, and that except for their strange abilities, there was no difference between them and ordinary people. Looking at the bodies of the women hanging on the gallows, he could determine that the smallest had only been around 14 to 15 years old. When he realized this, it suddenly felt like as if his heart was being pressed together, immediately returning the suffocating feeling. Apart from the refugees outside of King City, little else had changed within half a year. Beside the main road which led to the city gate, that was paved with blue stones, all the other side roads and alleys were made out of mud. Now, under the hot summer sun, the ground was covered with cracks, and whenever a carriage passed by, a burst of yellow dust would rise up from it. It was hard to imagine that the capital city of the kingdom unexpectedly was outdone by the municipal constructions of a desolated small town just outside of the western border. After crossing 2 streets, in one line the caravan entered the market area. Instead of following, Theo waved goodbye to Margaret and turned walking on his own into an alley. Arriving at the familiar entrance of the underground Trumpeter Tavern, he immediately pushed the door open and went inside. "Hey! The tavern will only open at night," someone shouted. Theo ignored them and directly went to the bar, facing the strong man who busied himself with earnestly wiping a wine glass. "Still remember me? From under which stone did you jump up, grasshopper? Didn't you hear that the pub only opens at night?" He impatiently put down the glass, raised his gloomy face, while 2 waiters also came over to encircle him. stopping their table and chair arranging. "Now I will count till 3, Sir Theo?" "It's me," Theo spat to the side. "I have a good business deal I want to offer you." Chapter 2:15 Skeleton Fingers. Theo was brought to the second floor of the small house. The brawny man had told the waiters to continue cleaning, then shut the door. These rooms were usually used to entertain those customers with special needs, but for only 25 copper royals a night, the environment wasn't very elegant. Within the room, there was an unpleasant moldy smelling and a narrow bed, with a bedding on top which was so crumpled as if it hadn't been washed or taken out to the sun to dry for a very long time. The cracked table was missing a corner and the cracks were filled with a black flocule, giving it a dirty and greasy appearance. But Theo was too lazy to care about all of this. He sat on the bedside, quietly waiting for the opposite party to start to talk. "You have disappeared for quite a while," the brawny man said with a grin. "Since Sir Nadji has taken your seat, why didn't you have come to the tavern? Even if you are no longer in charge of this matter, you could still have come to drink a cup of wine with us, right?" His nickname was Black Hammer. He was the watchman for the covert trumpeter, and one of Skeleton Finger's member. His name sounded quite scary, but he was only one of King City's many street rats. To help each other, the rats had formed groups, divided the territory under their control, and according to their business operation they were either a huge and firm group or a loose organization. These underground organizations had more or less all had a noble or wealthy merchant as mastermind behind them, and the Skeleton Fingers was no exception. But unlike a domestic dog, most rats didn't choose to be loyal to only one person. As long as they became interested, they would work for everyone. "Nonsense," Theo said bluntly. "This night, you will call Hillway, Swineherd, Silver Ring, and Pot into the tavern. I have something I need to get done." "These few are only the people of the covert trumpeter," Black Hammer shouted out shocked. "Will they be enough?" I said, "This is an excellent business opportunity." He shrugged. "I have come looking for you since you have done a lot of things for me already." According to the usual procedure when dealing with street rats, the first step was to find the connector, and then it was the other party who determined whether they take up the task or not. When the two came to an agreement, the connector would delegate the task to the right person, and at the same time be in charge of the money. Of course, during the whole process, they would make no contract or certificate which could be used as a guarantee, and ultimately, if they could achieve the desired result for the employer was also completely unknown. In general, it could be said that the more prestigious organizations would care about their credibility, so their commission costs were also high, while the new organization would charge a lower price, but made it more likely to lose one's life and property in the process. With time, a delicate balance had been formed between the street rats and the city patrol, which together maintained an image of superficial order inside of King City. Before Theo had entered the palace to become a palace guard, he had served as patrol, responsible for giving some task to the street rats to handle if they were inconvenient for the public to see. As a result, making it very clear to him which groups of street rats were the most powerful and what their share in King City was, giving him the opportunity to eliminate the time taken to deal with the connector. As for the reason why he had chosen the Skull Fingers, that was because they weren't as thoroughly bad as the others. "Can I ask you, whom are you working now?" Black Hammer asked after a moment of hesitation. Theo didn't give him an answer. Instead, he simply pointed with his thumb into the direction of the palace behind him. After leaving the patrol and rats, most people only knew that he had become a guard, but they didn't know that he was soon selected by Wimbledon III as the personal guard of the fourth prince, following His Royal Highness to Border Town. Within his 6 months of disappearance, they should think that he had been working in the palace. Moreover, by just pointing to the direction of the palace, he hadn't lied. The royal family wasn't only Timothy, Roland Wimbledon was also a member of the royal family. "I see," he nodded. "But Hillway and Swineherd are gone. Can I pick my own hands?" "What happened to them?" "Dead," Black Hammer said, full of hate. "Within last year's winter, a conflict with the people of Dreamland Water arose. They had taken hold of poppy flowers and dying fern, selling it within the northern city district. Cautious had led everyone to drive them back. During the fight, Hillway got a knife to his neck. The blood simply could not be stopped from flowing, and swineherd was also thrown into the canal. Theo frowned. With such kind of things the patrol would bother themselves. From time to time they would even deliberately provoke the rats into biting each other in order to control their strength and quantity, so whenever one of them died, they wouldn't care. That's all right, but remember, they must be the people of the tavern. Theo took a deep breath after leaving the covert trumpeter. The moist and moldy smell in the pub made him want to vomit. Only when his lungs were once more filled with the burning hot summer air was he able to disperse the dark and suffocating feeling. Although Black Hammer had invited him to wait in the tavern, even claiming that he would come up with good wine to entertain him, Theo wasn't willing to stay in that small place for too long. In the event that something unforeseen arose, he would be unable to react by the time he became aware of it. After leaving the tavern, he decided to go to the inner city, and look for a reasonable inn and reserve a room there for the night. As for the soldiers of the First Army, they were already very skilled in setting up camp for the night, so there was no need for him to worry about them. When night fell, Theo returned to the covert trumpeter. At this time, the pub was doing its usual business, and from time to time a customer would enter or exit. For a while he just watched from the dark, waiting for the regular customers to come into the house. As a low-grade tavern in the outer city, most of the visitors were commoners, so the drinks were also the cheap ale. Just 10 copper royals was enough to drink several large cups in succession. Within the noisy surrounding, he quickly found Black Hammer's men. They were sitting around a table next to the wall, and on top of their table laid a white phalange. When Theo, calmly and collectively walked over, a person immediately stood up to make a place for him. "Good evening, sir," Silver Ring and Pot greeted him with a nod. "Let me introduce these two to you. This is Little Finger." Black Hammer patted the little woman beside him and then pointed at the young man opposite her. "And this one is Hill Fox, he only recently became a member of the Skeleton Fingers." "Fox?" Theo's eyes stopped on the opposite party, while the latter somewhat sparingly bowed his head in greeting. "Within our line of work, there are only a few who have a family name." Black Hammer laughed. He had gambled until nothing was left. First, his wife ran away, then he even had to sell his house. After that he came to join the ranks of the street rats. He used to live in the northern district and was an occasionally patron of the covert trumpeter. Silver Rings and Pot were old acquaintances, while Little Finger looked like any other child from the streets, but Hill Fox, Theo actually felt that there was something strange about him, yet, his appearance really resembled someone who had gone through such a drastic change of life, suffering physically and mentally. Yet, within his eyes, there was something, which Theo was unable to grasp. It was like. In the end, after thinking about it, he was still unable to get an answer. Whatever, since he had been living in the northern district and was a customer of the tavern, there shouldn't be a problem. Furthermore, my first task is just to complete the transport of the fugitives. There isn't any risk involved. Alright, now listen, the job you have to do isn't complicated. The upper ranks don't want to see that the number of fugitives who fled from the eastern region continues to increase. The grain reserves are becoming less and less every day. If it goes on like this, it is only a matter of time until riots start to break out, making it much harder to deal with them. Because of this, they thought of a way to lure them away from King City. "What do you need us to do?" Black Hammer asked. "It is very simple. You only have to spread the message that the wasteland in the west is being reclaimed and that the local lords are willing to accept the fugitives. Moreover, a fleet with mercenaries has already set out to escort them back and will arrive in 3 days at the canal's pier. So, the only thing you need to do is to spread this message between those fools outside of the city. Feel free to add the specific details. The more attractive you make it appear, the better. But if the appointed time for the fleet and mercenaries comes and they aren't there, saying all this will have no use." Silver Ring said. "Of course, the escort will come," Theo smiled. "Ah?" He got startled. "Is it really true that the lords of the western region want to accept them?" "You fool," Black Hammer gave him a slap on top of his head. "If you want to play such an act, you naturally have to go through with it. After they get escorted to the western region, do you believe they will be able to come back by only relying on their 2 feet? As for how to handle them afterward, let the local lords get a headache about that. He looked to Theo. This is indeed not a difficult task, but the reward. Theo raised 2 fingers, twice as much. My new employer has money, unlike the patrol. He just wants to see some results as quickly as possible. How much gold royals it will cost him, doesn't matter to him. He smiled. Haven't I told you already, that this is very a good business deal? Chapter 216 Demonic Plague. During the following 2 days, Theo moved non-stop between Margaret's Chamber of Commerce and King City's suburbs. Margaret would provide the fleet for the transportation of the refugees, while the First Army, who would be disguised as mercenaries, would arrive at the canal's pier at the appointed time to arrange the screening and embarking. As for the dissemination of information, Theo wasn't worried that Black Hammer would handle such a task relaxedly after swallowing such attractive bait. Letting street rats do such work was much more convenient than giving it to outsiders. Although their range of activity was limited to the northern district, the refugees would certainly spread the news amongst themselves. Furthermore, he couldn't handle them all at once anyway. Prior to this, His Royal Highness had explicitly explained to him that this was a task which could be done over time by sending one ship after another. On the day of the fleet's arrival, nearly 1,000 destitute and homeless people had come to the pier, much more than Theo had expected. If he had relied on the First Army to promote the journey, Theo believed that if 100 people had come, it would already have been considered a good result. According to His Royal Highness's screening requirements, the children were allowed to embark on the ships first, followed by the children's families, and finally, the other adults. As for elderly citizens, Theo discovered that there were almost no people with gray hair in the crowd. Perhaps they didn't want to risk going to a remote and unknown place, or they might have been unable to escape from the eastern region to King City since the beginning. After the first fleet of 10 single-mast ships left the pier with 500 people on board, the rest of the waiting refugees were driven back to the camp, but they all took the news with them that the fleet will return. Thinking that he could easily succeed in completing the first of His Highness' tasks, he did not expect that he would encounter a severe problem soon after the merchant fleet brought away the second batch of people. A strange illness had suddenly broken out in King City. The first deceased to be discovered had laid at the roadside, his body covered with many black spots, and his teeth fallen off. His skin had also broken open in many places, and the blood flowing out of those places had changed color, turning black like the blood of witches who were devoured by the terror of the demonic bite. But this time, the deceased was not a woman, but rather a male resident of the northern district. Not long after, several corpses with the same symptoms were discovered one after another. Furthermore, some of the people who came into contact with the corpses also began to grow dark spots. Whether it was herbal treatment or cold compresses, nothing was able to subdue the illness. Even when using bloodletting treatment, their blood, which was usually red, had now turned black, as if having been mixed with a large amount of ink. Soon, fear spread through the masses, which steadily increased the amount of people who went to the church to pray, but everything was useless. Every day, more and more people showing those black spots would appear, and even people with the same symptoms were discovered in the fugitives outside of the city. Finally, the high priest of the church appeared in front of the praying masses and declared that all this was a plot by the witches to spread the devil's power, infecting other innocent people this way. Furthermore, the priest said that at present, any treatment was unable to resist the power of the devil, and the people who fall to the corrosion will die under extreme pain. However, the church would never idly sit by. They had already developed the holy elixir, which was powerful enough to drive the devil back to hell. This statement let the infected people once more see a glimmer of hope. Every day, they would sit in front of the church's door, waiting for the release of the holy elixir. Although Theo had strong doubts regarding the church's claims, he temporarily stopped the shipping off of the refugees to provide for every contingency. "Why do you want to stop?" Black Hammer asked, extremely puzzled. "Why aren't we rushing to send those people away before they become eroded by the devil's spirit? Do you want them to stay in the city to become seeds for the witches?" "This is the wish of the people above," Theo answered impatiently. "They are just ordinary fugitives. If the West is also infected by this evil force, how will the kingdom then look like?" Black Hammer slightly stuttered, "But what happens to the western region doesn't matter to us at all. Sir Theo, how about this? We just don't hear the opinion of the people above and simply drag them away. Think about it, this is such a demonic illness, one touch and you are infected. I simply can't stay here and wait for the devil to come, even if a wall is separating them from us. As if we haven't heard them? Theo asked coldly. Just like me, you also only have one head. After he left the pub, he went to the next shop marked with Margaret's caravan emblem, and revealed his token. I must see your boss. The sooner, the better. It didn't take long until he could meet with the female merchant in a secret room of the shop. The disease definitely has nothing to do with the witches, Margaret began. If they could release such a demonic power, the god's stone of retaliation would be powerless, and they would have already turned Hermes into a dead zone. I also think the same, but this is still a pressing matter that has to be reported to His Royal Highness. Although there have been no symptoms of black spots on the two groups of people who embarked to border town, it seems that this disease does not manifest itself on the spot. In case some people on the ships were infected by this evil force, border town must prepare for it immediately. Theo pulled a folded letter out of a pocket. I need your help to send the message back to His Highness as quickly as possible. Naturally, she nodded. Information transmission between merchants has always been the fastest. After several days of sailing, Lucia wanted to vomit. During the past month, it seemed she had been always fleeing, first from the eastern region to King City, then from King City to the western region. The reason for the former was that she had been driven out of her home, while for the latter was because she had finally come to see a glimmer of hope again. Elder sister, water, I am thirsty. Belle gave a painful moan and reached out, grabbing Lucia's arm. All right, I'll go and fetch you some water. Lucia grabbed the bag on hand and staggered out of the cabin, lying flat at the lowest point of the ship and reaching out with her arm to soak the bag in the river water. Her stomach acid bubbled up again, in the end making it impossible for her to contain it, and with a wow sound the vomit flew out. She also spit the last of the gravel left in her stomach out, not only through her mouth, but also through her nostrils. She forcefully suppressed the urge to burst into tears, clenched her teeth, and rubbed her face with the back of her hand, then continued to soak the bag in the river. When the bag was finally filled with water, she carefully held it in her arms and trotted back to the cabin. The water is here, open your mouth. However, Belle's face again appeared to be a bit worse than before. Her cheeks weren't covered with their normal flush and her forehead was also terribly hot. She tightly clenched her lips, only intermittently releasing moaning noises. With no other option than forcing her mouth open, Lucia twisted the water bag so that the water droplets would directly fall into her sister's mouth. You are too close to her. The dark spots have already reached her neck, she cannot hold on for much longer. A weak middle-aged man who was also in the cabin said, We will die here, you have to think of yourself. Shortly after they had left King City on the ship, some people had begun to suffer from a terrifying disease. First, their whole body would become unusually hot, followed by the emergence of dark spots on their skin. Within 3 to 4 days, the illness would begin to worsen. Not only had the infected fallen into a coma, but the people who came in contact with them also caught the disease. Therefore, on the 5th day, the fleet had cleaned out a sailboat specifically for the transportation of the patients. Lucia guessed the reason why the other side has just thrown the sick refugees into the river was because there were also some infected people on their side. After the first dark spots were discovered on Belle's body, Lucia didn't listen to any discouraging words from others and decided that she would follow her younger sister onto the ship of sickness. In order to take care of young Belle, she had almost not slept for an entire 2 days. However, Lucia had still not given up. She believed that as long as they were able to reach the western region, all would change for the better. If the rumors were right, the Witch Cooperation Association would be her final hope. Chapter 217 The Cause of the Disease. Roland and the witches had finished, but just as he decided to return to his room and take an afternoon nap, Carter stormed into the dining hall. Your Royal Highness, the ships transporting the Eastern Region refugees from King City just arrived at the pier. So fast? It seems that Theo's work efficiency is quite high, Roland thought, pleased, as a man who has relations to the black and white side of the society, his time serving in the patrol wasn't wasted. However, when he looked at his sweating chief knight and saw his pressed brows, Roland immediately felt that there was something wrong. What happened? The people on board have caught a strange disease. Carter described the patient's characteristics quickly. At first, it was only a few individuals, but by now the disease has spread over 2 to 3 ships. Even the soldiers of the First Army have been infected. An illness which causes black spots all over the body, which also spreads on contact. This sounds very similar to a plague, similar to the famous Black Death. However, the bubonic plague bacillus didn't change the color of the infected's blood, not to mention making their skin break apart. Roland wrinkled his brow. His first thought was Lily, but they had not fully grasped the scope of her new ability yet, and making her handle an infectious diseases which had never been heard of before would be very dangerous. If she were unable to cure them, it would be quite probable that she would also get infected. So he had to make his decision very carefully, but according to Carter's description, it seemed that these people couldn't hold out for much longer. In any case, at least I have to first blockade the area. Thinking up to here, Roland ordered Carter, go and send out the First Army. They should set up a restricted area outside of the pier, forbidding anybody from entering or leaving it. Additional, tell them, Miss Nana and I are also already on the way. Yes. Is it going to be very difficult? Nightingale asked. That's still unclear, everything depends on Lily's ability, he said. Call all of the members of the Witch Union, there will be no afternoon naps today. Through the whole journey to the pier, Roland thought about how to verify the effectiveness of Lily's ability while keeping her isolated from the patients. Fortunately, her ability to protect freshness belonged to the summoning category, with a range of 5 meters like that of many other witches. It allowed her to use and efficiently control her ability over a distance without the need of actually touching the target. Thus he brought 2 carpenters along, and with the help of Anna they quickly built a rectangle box. The room was split in the middle, and it was possible to see the opposite side through a window embedded within the barrier. Within the lower half of the wall 2 symmetrical holes were cut, on top of which Soraya had painted a flexible curtain, so that when Lily stretched her hands through the hole, the coating would tightly wrap around her hands. Furthermore, the soft sky-colored curtain would also cut off the air circulation between the 2 rooms. With this, as long as she later washed her hands with alcohol, all possibility of being infected should be eliminated. During all this, it were still the 100 soldiers of the First Army who maintained the order on top of the ships. That they were still able to uphold discipline wasn't due to their strong willpower, but because most of them believed that the angelic Miss Nana would certainly let them recover like she always had. As soon as the box was prepared, one of the soldiers who had shown the black spots but could still walk was selected. According to instructions, he entered the room and stood still. Lily then stretched out her hands through the barrier, and made full use of her ability. At the same time, Roland stood beside her and observed the soldier's situation through the window. The magic power took effect silently, and when the little girl nodded, giving Roland the signal that she was done, he opened his mouth and asked, "How do you feel now?" "Your Highness?" When the soldier heard Roland's voice, he excitedly raised his hand to salute, then froze on the spot. "Hey, I feel like my strength has been restored." "Oh my God! Your Highness, I already feel much better now." Roland also saw that the dark spots on the soldier's hand were rapidly fading. This definitely isn't a plague symptom. If I remember it correctly, the soldier's black spots should have come from a complicated sepsis and a high degree of cyanosis. Even after killing the bubonic plague bacillus, these spots should have taken a long time before they faded away. After all, Lily doesn't possess the ability to heal. However, her new ability had an effect on the unknown infection, which made Roland feel a little relieved. Once you have fully recovered, go and call for the other soldiers to come in. Let the next 10 people enter, whether they show symptoms or not, they all have to come here for treatment. Yes. Your Highness, the soldier shouted, paused for a moment, then saluted again. Thank you, Miss Nana. It wasn't Miss Nana. This time the one who saved your life was Miss Lily, Roland corrected him laughingly. Only in the case of the illness already advancing so far that the skin has broken open, Will you need Miss Nana to heal you? Yes, well, he touched his head. Thank you, Miss Lily. By the time when the soldier had left, Lily glanced at the prince. I didn't mind that he thought it had been Nana, I do not need to be thanked. Well, if that's case, why would you suddenly stand up so straight? When Roland looked at her and saw her swing her two ponytails, he couldn't stop himself from rubbing her head, to which the other side unexpectedly didn't show any sign of protest, but stifled a hum. Since this wasn't a plague, in the end, what is the cause of this disease? The moment he left the box, Nightingale appeared at his side and leaned over. Your Royal Highness, I have just seen a strange phenomenon, the blood flowing out of their wounds. It contains signs of magic. What? Roland stopped shocked. Within the fog, it seems like I'm looking at the stars in the night, Nightingale explained. Until now, I've never seen such a tiny magic glow. This came unexpected. But as long as something involves magic, it has to be closely followed up, not because of the witches, but because it means that the church could likely be involved. Now, I'm at least sure of one thing, this disease wasn't caused by a natural bacteria or virus. I got it. After thinking for a moment, the prince continued, since it is like this, I have to get some drops of blood to observe. No, you may get infected. Nightingale interrupted nervously. Rest assured, Roland smiled at her, Lily's new ability has completely restrained the disease. The blood samples had been taken from a coma patient, then he covered the glass slide with the blood and placed it on the stage, afterward adjusting the distance. When the scene through the lens gradually became apparent, he thought in case the symptoms were caused by something with only the size of a bacteria, it may be that he couldn't see anything. But when the object came into focus, Roland could hardly believe his eyes. Within the narrow line of sight, he saw a number of fat bugs with tentacles slowly moving through the blood. From time to time, they were spraying out some sort of mucus from their rear, which resembled thin hairs. Their size was nearly of the same dimension as single-celled algae, but just like Lily's mother's, their body wasn't transparent, making it difficult to distinguish between whether it belongs to a single-celled organism or not. Fortunately, the magical glow of the bugs didn't affect the ability of the little girl, letting her mothers playing their role. When a copy was mixed into a sample of blood, it would even give priority to attacking those strange insects, and turn them into one of their own kind. When all the soldiers of the First Army had been healed, to avoid any accidents, Roland ordered that all the fugitives when stepping into the box should wear a hood and would be led by the soldiers to help them enter. At the same time, another box was also set up, which was mainly there for Nana to treat the seriously ill patients with the open wounds. The treatment continued from noon until evening, and when the more than 500 people from the 10 ships had fully recovered, the crowd burst into cheers. Many people kneeled on the ground, shouting one wave of "Long live His Highness" after the next, unable to quieten down for a long time. You don't seem to be happy? The Nightingale winked at him. The one who cured the disease wasn't me, but Lily and Nana, who are witches. Roland shook his head. They should be the ones to whom they cheer for. Having said that, he, of course, knew that it wouldn't be wise to tell it to those who haven't fully accepted the witches. So he just sighed softly and hoped that one day witches could also come up to stand on stage. It seemed that Nightingale could understand the thought within Roland's heart. She generously patted his shoulder and said, "It is unlikely that anyone cares about it, you have already done enough. Besides, the day will come sooner or later, won't it?" She paused for a moment. Well, there's a good news that I forgot to tell you. Which one? There might soon be another member added to the Witch Union, Nightingale revealed with a grin. Chapter 218 Lucia. Belle's condition stabilized. Like the time they had boarded the ship for the first time, they were once more arranged oddly. Those mercenaries armed with the wooden spears divided the people into smaller groups. Those whose life were in danger were the first to be carried into the strange room. Afterward, they took the young children, then they took families of the children, and finally, it was the adults' turn. Lucia was placed together with Belle in the front of the row. The whole treatment process was handled very quickly. They blindfolded her sister, and 2 mercenaries grasped her under the arms and carried her into the cabin. She didn't have to wait for a long time before someone placed a pill in her hand. The pill was very small, and had a slightly sweet taste. At the same time, the mercenaries also took the initiative to tell her that they had also fed the medicine to her sister so that she didn't need to worry. When she was out of the room and could take off her hood, she was pleasantly surprised to see that Belle's colors was improving at a visible speed. Although she was still in a coma, her forehead was no longer burning hot, the flush on her face had also faded, and the dark spots disappeared without a trace. When all the people had been freed from their fear of their impending death, they felt like they had gained a new life and became so excited that they could no longer contain themselves after seeing the man with gray hair standing in the distance. They kneeled down and cheered, paying him the highest of respects. From the mercenary's mouth, they had heard that he was the lord of this land, the one that was in charge of the western region, His Royal Highness Roland Wimbledon. Afterward, following exactly what had been promised in the rumors, the lord not only lit bonfires at the edge of the pier, but also distributed meat porridge to everyone and told them that they would be paid and also received food and shelter as long as they were willing to work for the town. While everyone was enjoying the fragrant meat porridge, they were also talking about how fortunate it was that they had boarded the ships and fled to this western region, and then once more praised His Highness for his kindness. Only Lucia felt a little anxious. How can I get in touch with the Witch Cooperation Association? The secret message only said that a group of witches lived in Border Town. It didn't mention how I can find them. Most probably this important part had gotten lost during the transmission process. She had only faintly heard that the news had been spread within the large cities of the kingdom's central region. The moment when the people had filled their stomachs, and the mercenaries began guiding them to wooden sheds near the river, a woman's voice suddenly came from behind Lucia. "Were you looking for us?" She was so frightened that at the same time she turned her head, she also jumped 2 steps forward, ready to escape, but when the speaker's appearance came into her eyes, Lucia couldn't help but be rooted to the spot. Gosh, what a beautiful woman! Her long curly hair, illuminated by the gentle orange glow of the flickering flames, her eyes, twinkling bright as the stars, a sweet smile. But the most striking part was her aura, which wasn't inferior to that of any noble, as if she was an important person herself. "My name is Nightingale, I'm a witch, welcome to the border town." Becoming aware of this feeling, Lucia was unable to stop herself from lowering her head. My name is Lucia White, I want to join you." "In that case, come with me," Nightingale said with a smile, "I'll take you home." At this time the sun had already fallen behind the mountains, only leaving a weak light behind. While carrying the sleeping Belle, Lucia slowly followed behind her. "When was your time of awakening?" Nightingale suddenly asked. "Awakening?" Lucia got started. "That's the moment when you got turned into a witch," Nightingale explained. "From that moment on, your body will continue to gather magic, and because of that, we call this transformation awakening. I think, maybe 2 years ago," Lucia recalled. "Is magic the power of demons?" "That's just the church's excuse, nothing more." She shook her head. "Magic is an ability given by God, it has nothing to do with good and evil. The so-called demonic bite is just the pain experienced when the magic within your body becomes too plentiful. This can easily be avoided with practice." "I do not need to bear that pain?" Lucia's eyes grew wide. "Yes, as long as there is no oppression of the church, us witches don't have to bear the pain of the bite." Nightingale explained, "But here in our home, we can use our magic freely." Then she pointed behind her. "Is this lovable fellow your younger sister? What about your other family?" "They all died, only Belle and I could escape." For a moment Lucia kept silent. A group of people attacked Valencia, burning, looting, and killing everywhere. In order to resist them, Father. His chest was pierced by several swords and Mother made us run away quickly. In the end, she also. The grief which had been enclosed within her heart for so long made it impossible for her to continue the sentence. All of the suffering, hunger, thirst, fear, and grievances, in short, the whole injustice she had to endure along the way, suddenly burst free. For her sister, she had clenched her teeth and held on, but now, it seemed that the defense lines she had built around her heart was no longer able to block the emotional ups and downs from her thoughts, which quickly turned her sobbing into very loud cries. She knew that this wasn't a good time for it, that during the first meeting she should keep her courtesy, but the tears were like a storm, they couldn't get stopped. She will hate me for this, right? She could feel how her tears and snot mixed together and her mouth began to taste salty. However, to Lucia's surprise, a pair of arms suddenly wrapped themselves around her, taking her into a warm hug, gently patting the back of her head. Taking completely no offense because of the dirt and tears on her face. Instead, she softly said, "Cry, cry now, it is fine to let it all out." When Lucia's outburst finally calmed, she raised her head, only to see that Nightingale's shoulders had been soaked through with her tears. "I'm sorry," she blushed. "It doesn't matter, is it better now?" Then Nightingale took out a handkerchief and helped her to wipe her face clean, picked Belle up with one hand and held her in the other. "Let's go, there are still many sisters waiting to welcome you." Lucia had thought that the witch's residence would be located somewhere in a small abandoned warehouse or basement. She never expected that Nightingale would bring her to the castle area. Wasn't that the Lord's private territory? Even more surprisingly, the guards not only did not stop her, instead they also greeted her. Could it be that the whole town is under the control of the Witch Cooperation Association? Reaching the third floor of the castle, she walked into a brightly lit room, only to shockingly discover that the man sitting on the opposite side was the lord who had recently received the cheers of the masses. "This is the leader of the Witch Union, His Highness, Lord Roland Wimbledon. He took in the survivors of the Witch Cooperation Association, and also let spread the message to other cities, hoping to attract more homeless sisters." Nightingale introduced the man. "He made Border Town into the home of us witches. You do not need to doubt this point. After all, the people who treated your sister and all the other sick people on board of the ships were us witches." Lucia's head had turned blank. She totally hadn't anticipated that there would be noble willing to provide a home for witches, instead of seeing them as tools or slaves. When her soul finally came back to her body, she began to panic and bowed in a flustered manner. Her bizarre posture was so out of shape that Nightingale couldn't suppress her laugh. "Don't mind it, His Royal Highness does not care about etiquette." "You came from the Eastern Territory?" The Lord's voice was calm and relaxed, not giving her the impression of an interrogation, but more of a friendly chat. Lucia stole a glance at him, seeing that he was sitting leisurely on his chair, and looked at her with an expression full of interest. "Yes." As the conversation became deeper, and Nightingale supplemented some explanation, her mood gradually relaxed. Even though her counterpart was a noble, but he didn't show an aggressive attitude, but rather the care of an elder. "So, when your awakening was 2 years ago, you shouldn't be an adult yet," he spoke full of interest. "So, what is your ability?" "Turning goods back into their original form," Lucia said hesitatingly, "but it isn't effective on all things." "Their original form?" His Royal Highness touched his chin in thought. He then pushed a beautiful cup to her over the table. "Can you demonstrate it for me?" "This will destroy it." "It won't hurt." Lucia nodded, went to the table and put her hand on top of the cup. After a short while, the cup began to shrink and deform, ultimately forming into 3 distinct substances. The one on the far left looked like a pool of oil, dark and viscous. The one in the middle seemed to be a small cluster of fine black powder. Lastly, the one on the far right appeared to be clear water, which was slowly dripping down from the edge of the table. Chapter 219 Older Sister, Younger Sister. Welcome to the Witch Union. In the hall, a group of witches of different ages and colors raised their glasses cheerfully. Thank you." Lucia felt her eyes become teary again. She sniffed and impulsively tried to restrain her tears. She raised her cup, then drank a mouthful of wine, which didn't taste as bitter as she remembered but was slightly sweet instead. After have gone to see the Lord, and with Nightingale's assistance, Lucia was able to wash Belle and take a bath herself. Afterward putting on a set of clean clothes. When her sister had been settled, Lucia once more followed Nightingale into the castle hall. Here, the witches had prepared a welcoming party for her. This was the first time Lucia ever saw so many of her kind, subsequently also dispersing the last trace of doubt in the bottom of her heart. In case the witches had been imprisoned here or forced to serve the Lord, they would never be able to reveal such a light-hearted and bright smiles. Recalling the sentence Nightingale had previously said, this is the home of witches, she suddenly understood her feelings. In contrast to those witches whose identities were exposed and were thus hunted down and killed by the church, finding a safe place to live in wasn't easy. Since the bandits had attacked Valencia, a month of suffering and constant fleeing had followed. But now, with the warm welcome of the Witch Union, she could finally let her constantly alarmed mind relax a bit. At the same time, she also realized how magical a banquet with many witches participating could become. Using black flames, the raw goat's meat roasted perfectly within a flash, while the basin containing it was completely unharmed. A little girl with short blonde hair flew in the air, holding jug to fill everyone's cup. While a witch with an exotic look simulated a broad range of musical instruments, which all eventually converged into beautiful music. With Nightingale introducing them one after another, she was quickly able to remember each of their names. In this way becoming one of them and diluting the sadness in her heart even further. In the Witch Union there were mature and steady witches like Scroll and Wendy, and there was also Lise and Echo, who kind of resembled older sisters, as well as Anna, Soraya, and others whose age was similar to her own. But no matter who they were, none of them treated her as a stranger. For this, Lucia's heart was filled with gratitude. After the banquet, she and the witches wished each other a good night and then she returned to her new home. Although Belle was not a witch, the prince did not order her and her sister to separate. Instead, he gave them the last furnished guest room on the second floor of the castle all to them. Elder sister? Hearing her moving, Belle opened her eyes. You awoke. Lucia felt immediately delighted in her heart, quickly rushing to the bedside. How are you feeling? Belle looked like she had only been asleep for a long time, not having any trace of the plague or the pain it brought left on her body. With her eyes still a little cloudy, she opened her mouth and muttered, I feel so hungry. Wait, Lucia hurriedly took out a bag from her pocket and opened it, releasing the scent of grilled fish. This bag of fish slices had previously been given to her by Nightingale. There's some food for you. Sitting on the bed and seeing how Belle ate the fish, she was so gratified that she began to pat the little fellow's head. This year, her sister only just turned 10 years old, and now, without parents, she was the only one Belle could rely on. After eating 2 fishes she became more sober. Curiously looking around she asked, Where are we? It didn't look like the ship had such a big bed. Western Region's border town, we reached our destination. Have already arrived? She touched her cheek. But am I not sick? Will they agree to let the plague-stricken people enter the town? You are right, that would indeed be unlikely, replied Lucia. Seeing the blank expression on her sister's face, she began to laugh. However, the Lord's witches have already cured you. Afterward, she gave her a summary of what happened at the docks, and from now on we should stay here in the castle. Witches? Belle asked, tilting her head, are they the same as you, sister? That's right. Furthermore, everyone is very kind to me, especially a witch called Nightingale. Lucia softly poked her head. She also helped with giving you a bath. Oh, but you have always said that the nobles would loathe witches? Why would the Lord be willing to shelter witches? Taken aback by the question, Lucia coughed twice. This? Occasionally there are also 1 or 2 good people within the nobility. While taking out the last piece of dried fish out of the bag, Belle asked. Does that mean you need to work for him? Like those maids at home, sweeping the floor, cooking, and attending upon the Lord? What nonsense are you talking about? Lucia said, grasping her younger sister's face. I am a witch. It is only naturally that I have to help the Lord with my ability. As for maids having to do those things, who told you that? Mommy, she sadly whispered, she said that's also the reason why she never allowed Daddy to recruit a beautiful maid. Hearing her mention their family, Lucia's face suddenly darkened a lot. Instead of blaming Belle for bringing it up, she pulled her younger sister into a hug and softly sighed. She wasn't worried about her sister's theory. During the conversation with the Lord, she could see that besides of simple inquiries about her life experiences, the only other thing of interest to him was her ability, making it evident that he cared more about whether a witch's ability could serve useful to him or not. But, when thinking about her ability, Lucia felt deeply worried and sick at heart. She had never been ignorant about the witches' world. She knew that 6 months ago many witches had come through Valencia, and afterward the others had one after another left the city. She had heard that they were leaving for the fjords, wanting to find a new home. But Lucia didn't want to leave her parents, and because of that she hadn't agreed to travel with them. However, with her repeated contact with them, Lucia at least became aware that witches are used to dividing themselves into combat and non-combat types. Her ability to restore an object to its original state could be said to be useless. Not to mention using it during a fight, even using it during peaceful times it was already difficult for her to control. Her father had been a merchant, operating the family's papermaking workshop, so it was often that the living room was filled with the prepared straw paper. But on the day when she became a witch, she unwittingly chanced upon using her ability, turning the paper back into a pile of grass and fine powder. After the event, although her parents severely rebuked her, they did not give her away to the church. Instead, they repeatedly warned her to hide herself carefully and if necessary, even go so far as put on a god's stone of retaliation, disguising herself as devoted believer. At first, Lucia was full of curiosity about the ability, often secretly hiding in her bedroom to restore all kinds of test items. But she quickly discovered that this ability was extremely difficult to control. For example, restoring the straw paper again, she sometimes got the same grass bits as the first time, but other times there were only black granule left. In case she would continue to cast her magic on an object, it will only become less and less, and the final product was not a fine powder but rather a grit, which meant that her restoration ability couldn't be used to restore a heavily damaged object. She was only able to destroy what other had carefully produced. The other witches had also thought that her ability was useless. In case she wanted to use it in battle, she would have to get too close. Furthermore, her ability was also ineffective on a living body, so not to mention using it to fight against a trained knight, even the average farmer would already be terribly difficult. And so, considering to become a combat witch was out of the question for her, but also as a non-combat witch, she couldn't think of any uses. It was almost like her ability was on the lowest level. Coming to this conclusion, she had been depressed for a long time. But now, what Lucia was now more anxious about was, if His Royal Highness also believed her to be useless, will he cast her out of the castle? With an uneasy feeling, she blew out the candles, took her sister who was perfectly satisfied gnawing on the finished fish bones into her arms, slowly closed her eyes then awaited the arrival of a new day. Chapter 220 Decomposition and Restoration. Early on the next morning, Roland had filled the office floor with a variety of test items. From solid to liquid, from minerals to ingots, from inorganic to organic matter, simply everything that should be here was here. It seems you are euphoric. Nightingale squat down, took a small steamed dumpling from a meal plate and threw it into her mouth. Of course, there is a new witch in town, and even better, her ability is so incredible. Roland rose his eyebrows. Also, do not think that I didn't see that, you just slyly ate one of the test objects. There are still a few left, Nightingale said while wiping her mouth. Is Lucia's ability really that useful? It's of the greatest usefulness, not matter if it's decomposing or restoration, they both would bring significant improvement to the smelting and manufacturing industry. Roland said excitedly, in case she paired up with Anna, they could easily upgrade the machine's strength by several times. Even if they couldn't be mass-produced, as long as they made several machines by hand, the level of the town's production would definitely receive a qualitative improvement. Right now, the machines produced for Grey Castle Industry by Anna are still working extremely accurately, but they were limited by the material's own flaws. During the production process, their abrasion and deformation problems would become increasingly evident. For example, seeing the cutting tool break into many pieces is a frequently observed phenomenon. If it wasn't for Anna supplementing maintenance parts, these machines could only be used for 1 or 2 years at most. But if Lucia uses her ability to control the parts the materials turn into precisely enough, it might be possible to use high-strength iron, steel, and even alloy for manufacturing the machine tools. Not only would it increase the tool's lifetime, their processing efficiency and processing standard could take a step further. By then items like the revolver rifle, which at the moment could only be produced by the Anna, would be able to enter the state of reaching mass production. Is it so? Nightingale skipped back to the table, but she does not seem to think so. Because she hasn't really recognized the value of her ability, it's the same with Mystery Moon. Roland further explained unconcerned, when Lucia finished studying theoretical foundations of natural science, she certainly won't think this way any longer. Nightingale kept silent. Not knowing how to reply, she instead put 2 dried fishes into her mouth. When Lucia finished her breakfast and came to the office, her ability test officially began. With his heart full of expectations, Roland followed closely how one test item after another changed and if there were any differences between them. For example, substances like iron ingots and iron ore both changed into a silver-white granule, but when he took a closer look, he also discovered that at their edges there lay different kinds of powder. Grapes and meat didn't change at all, while the dumplings turned into water, flour, and meat residues. When she was halfway through the test objects, she suddenly stopped and said with some embarrassment, "I seem to have exhausted my magic." Roland looked to Nightingale, only to see the latter nod. The amount of magic her body stores is very small, it just looks like a cloud of drifting smoke, but it is for the first time that I see a color like hers. What kind of color? Gray, Nightingale said. Roland returned to his desk and waved to Lucia, calling her over. The witch's magical capacity grows with their age and training. You are still not an adult, so being able to do so much is already quite good. Waiting until the young woman had walked to the table, he pushed the already prepared parchment over to her. Since you decide to stay in Border Town, please sign this contract. When Lucia came to the end of the contract, she couldn't help but grasp a mouthful of air. A whole gold royal a month? Your Highness can, but my ability hasn't been thoroughly tested? This has nothing to do with your ability, Roland smiled and shook his head. As long as you are a member of the Witch Union, this contract will always be effective. Even in the case that the witch's ability is useless? She asked in disbelief. You can also interpret it like that. The prince spread out his hands, but I do believe that the power of any witch has its own unique use, it's only a matter of unleashing that power. So you really don't have to worry about being useless. He paused. Also, you should already have heard of the real reason for the demonic bite from the other witches. So to ensure that you can smoothly pass through your day of awakening, you have to practice your skill every day. After dinner, Teacher Scroll will give lessons in the living room. You also have to attend the lecture. Although you have already mastered your reading and writing skill, you still have to study primary mathematics and natural foundation. Yes, Your Highness, Lucia nodded vigorously. You have a younger sister, right? Roland asked with a smile. When attending class, take her along with you, she should be at the right age for receiving an education. Lucia was slightly stunned, then, after raising her head to confirm that His Highness wasn't making fun of her, she happily bowed, as you say. After Lucia asked to be excused, Roland put the signed contract into the drawer, then thoughtfully looked at the broad range of test products on the ground. What is the result? Nightingale asked curiously. Awe-inspiring, he said, picking up the plate with the steamed dumplings, which now contained meat pieces and flour, for example this. When kneading the flour, the gluten will form a ramified structure, letting the flour dough become strong but flexible. Once cooked, due to the high temperature the gluten protein will denature, even when reground into powder. It is impossible to restore it to its previously smooth and exquisite appearance. This transformation is considered irreversible, but, Roland pinched into the small cluster of powder in the palm of his hand, and felt a silky feeling, just like from freshly ground flour. She was able to bring the meal back to its original appearance. Well, I can't say that I understand you, Nightingale curled her lips, but putting it that way, can her ability be seen as restoring a material back to its original state? It is not really like that, Roland pointed to the iron ingot. In the case that it was merely restoration, the iron ingot should have been returned into iron ore, but in fact, it was broken down into iron powder and other impurities. So in the end, what is her ability? Nightingale asked confused. For the time being I still haven't fully understood it, but if I had to speculate, I would say that her ability has 2 effects. As for its appearance, it manifests according to her knowledge and experience. Knowledge and experience? Essentially, there is no significant difference between meat and iron ore, they are both composed out of a variety of particles, but Lucia can only break down iron ore with her ability, but not the meat. I believe the reason for this is because she is unable to understand organic matter, or so to say, the constitution of life in generally, Roland explained, even though he wasn't sure whether this was correct, he still had no doubt that right now what Lucia needed the most was learning new knowledge. 3 days later, when the second convoy carrying refugees from the eastern region arrived at border town, the same disease had broken out on the ship. But this time it was much more severe, with almost half of the people being infected. After questioning some of the patients, Roland learned that the black spots had appeared the first day after boarding, which meant that they had been infected by the parasite earlier, and because of this the incubation period had been shortened a lot. At the same time, Roland also received a letter sent from King's City, which was sealed with the mark of Margaret's Chamber of Commerce. When reading the content of the letter, his brow wrinkled. When the demonic disease spread through King's City, the church declared that it was all a witch's conspiracy. They furthermore told the people that they had a holy elixir which could repel the evil spirits. Furthermore, even outside of King's City, many ill people had started to appear, and because of this Theo had chosen to temporarily stop the delivery of fugitives. If he wasn't calculating it wrong, the first fleet would return to King's City in 4 days, bringing with them the news that border town was able to cure the demonic plague. However, with nearly 1 week spent traveling, it would still be too late for those people who were already infected by the disease. Moreover, the public proclamation of the church also had the smell of a conspiracy in the works. After thinking it over again and again, he decided to send a small team to escort Lily to King's City. Otherwise, more than half of King's City population and the eastern region's refugees would die, and those who survived in the end would become devoted believers of the church. Roland had to do his utmost to prevent the birth of that kind of situation.